Right, great. Thank you very much indeed, and welcome to the first session at Carbon Calling. This is a wonderful space to enable you to share and to ask questions, to challenge and to provoke, to celebrate and to disrupt, but not agitate, because there is no agenda. Right, so this session is going to be quite interesting. I'm going to explain it in a moment. First of all, I'm Rob Yorke. I'm from the Black Mountains. I'm a rural commentator, moderator of discussions and environmental dialogue. I'm also a rural chartered surveyor. Joseph Joubert, who was a philosopher, said, "It is better to debate a question without settling it than to settle a question without debating it." So, this is going to be something, this session is going to be a little bit like Mock the Week meets Dragon's Den. Because you guys are going to be part of it, and the experiment is this. We're going to have 3 panelists, and they know who they are, 3 panelists at a time who will have 2 or 3 minutes to talk about whatever they want. They might want to ask you guys a question, they might want to pontificate on something, they might want to challenge something. So anything goes, okay? I'm not even going to introduce who they are or what they're going to talk about. The space is theirs. Then they'll be moved off, and then another 3 will come on. But once they've spoken, there'll be 3 roving microphones for you guys to kind of ask questions, push back, challenge, add to stuff, maybe provide new knowledge. David, I'm just going to hand it over to you for a couple of minutes, and then we're opening to the floor, and then we'll run from there. This is an experiment. Go.
Are these live yet? Yeah. Hi, I'm David Cox. I work for a company called Abe Energy. We are a renewables developer. For want of better words, we do onshore wind and solar and battery projects and a bit of green hydrogen. So my question really to the audience is, with the race to net zero, you as, well, a lot of you in the room are obviously landowners. Is it possible to have a balance between renewables and also food security and also habitat mitigation? Can we actually achieve those 3 things together at the same time, bearing in mind that the big targets that we've got to get to in the next 10, 15 years? So that's very simply my sort of opening statement.
Okay, well, that's very short and sweet. Anyone want to put their hand up and respond to that in any way or add a comment? Yes, please, there. No, wait for the mic.
Thank you. No, until we put a ceiling on the amount of energy that we're planning to use.
Very, very much so. I completely agree with you in terms of energy efficiencies throughout the different sectors, whether it's transport, whether it's residential, whether it's commercial. There's so much more that can be done at that level, and more energy is being consumed in this country. So, I quite completely agree with you. Until there is an actual cap put on that, we don't know what we actually have to get to. Therefore, for my world, in terms of renewable energy targets, we don't know where we can get to.
Yes, please.
Solar should be first put on every single rooftop and every single car park. I mean, one, because it cools your car down. It's great on a hot day. And that is now being done in the UK. It needs to be done much, much more rapidly. And hopefully there'll be more funding to do so before we take up land for solar.
Okay.
Yeah, we're working on a couple of car park schemes. France have actually put it into legislation, though, that every new car park in France has to have solar on. That's not the case at the moment in the UK. Maybe things will change now with the new government, but yeah.
Okay.
We have to be mindful while we're racing to net zero of the resources we're digging out from other impoverishing other countries and other places in the process. So without being mindful of that, I think we can't have the sort of it's a bit conceited to be talking about net zero.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of the, I presume you're referring a lot to the magnets that are in wind turbines and various, China's mined a lot for different elements which are used in the manufacture of that. Yes, supply chain needs to be looked at and greened as much as possible. Yes, we're not quite there yet, but other other energy technologies also use, but I think each technology needs to have an audit to show what is actually being used and where it's coming from. So yeah, I think it's for the industry to try and show that, to go, right, this is where we can't do everything completely from sustainable resources, but we need to strive to get there.
Okay, right.
I maybe
couple
just
more questions, please.
Yeah, I maybe just don't understand it enough. That could be the thing, but I just don't understand why we're. It's kind of following on from the point that's just been made. Like, we're just pandering to the bullshit. Like, we all know that, like, the farming industry and, like, land-based stuff isn't the greatest kind of producer of emissions by a long way.
Okay.
And there's an awful lot of other industries that could be doing a lot, so...
Thank you. Yeah, no, that's very good. But I'm just trying to also have aware of...
Yeah, transport's massively behind even farming. So.
That guy behind, yeah, there's a couple more, and then I think we're going to move on to the next. We've coming up to 4 minutes on that, which is...
Yeah. Going with the weighting of your question, and I think that the shed probably recognises that there's a lot of expectation being placed in the rural sector to produce nutritious food, environmental credit, sustainability, enhanced biodiversity, net gains. But the field that we're having to play in is not level. And when there's a massive importation drive to bring in food from other parts of the world, the carbon within the shipping costs isn't actually taken into account when it comes into the UK. Okay. I think that conversation needs to be dealt with first, so that when we are sweating and toiling and achieving what needs to be achieved, and I think we can, and the knowledge is in the room to achieve all of this, but we need to be working with a level playing field to get the rewards of our endeavours.
Okay, thank you. One more there, then. I think then we're going to move on. Thank you.
I'd kind of like to end with a question. Given that a lot of the materials that we need to power the renewable revolution are based in unstable nations, and then look into the future, the kind of mainstay in the next kick of the economy is going to be AI and quantum computing, which is a huge energy drain, alongside the drive to electric vehicles. Do you honestly believe that we can not use all of the land or too much land purely for renewable electricity? Do you not think that we probably need to take a backtrack and focus on nuclear?
Okay, fine. No, that's a good. And if you could have your final wrap up, reply, whatever.
Yeah. Okay, so
next.
Just on that, we wouldn't be using every scrap of land in which for renewables if we to get to net zero at the moment. You know, at the moment, I think solar only covers about 20% of what, say, golf courses do in this country. So I think in response to that, there needs to be a balance, but renewables will not cover the countryside in which to meet that net zero target. I think is the point I'm trying to make.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, David. Just a very quick round of applause. And just stay there. Emily, please.
Thanks, Rob. My name is Emily Grant. I am a sheep farmer and an independent consultant from Perthshire. It was really nice to be known as the other Emily, which is great. So I'm going to talk about something completely different. And actually, I mostly want to put out to people just in terms of their thoughts. So we're all human here, and humans suffer from biases. So we all have a degree of bias about things we do every day. And I wanted to talk about a couple of different biases that hopefully you've possibly heard of. One in particular is the Dunning-Kruger effect. Everyone know what that is? Where and I don't have an opportunity to show you what it looks like, but there's unless Rob can draw it for me really, really quickly.
No, I'm not going to try. Go on, keep going. Yeah, this is part of the challenge.
It's basically where our confidence in something grows more quickly than our competence. So there's known, you'll see a chart occasionally sometimes about the peak of stupidity, where we're learning something new, but actually we don't know nearly as much as we think we know, and you fall into the valley of despair. But there's also really good research that shows, for example, new pilots, once they've got to between 600 and 800 hours of flying time, they're most at risk of having an accident. Yeah, because their confidence has outcompeted their competence. So, and then there's another bias that I think we potentially suffer from, which is called desirability bias, which is where we really believe in something that we actually just want to be true, rather than maybe necessarily is. So I just wonder, and I throw out that because I think sometimes actually does a movement like Regen Ag, how does it avoid some of these biases? How do we make sure? Because I think these biases actually can have quite an impact on your business. So if anyone's got examples of how they try and avoid it, but how do we avoid some of these really human traits that we have and biases and make sure that we are making really good decisions?
Great. A great challenge there. Thank you very much. Any hands going up? Yes, one over there, please.
Hi, Emily. Change is really difficult. And once you start changing things, the ball starts rolling, you change a lot more. Where's the balance between change and thinking out of the box and looking back on, you hear so many people going on about the education system in agriculture and how behind the times it is. But is it really behind the times? Because to me, it set me up. It didn't teach me to think differently, but it certainly set me up with a basic scientific knowledge in which later years, 30 years later, made me question it. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, but how much do you value that background, Doug? How much do you pull on it? And how much does it change? Or how much does it impact on your decisions? I think you've hit on the really good point about questioning and critically thinking what you've already done. But do you ever think forward about making a change? Do you ever, sometimes in businesses we have what you call pre-mortems rather than post-mortems, where a group will get together and they'll think about, okay, this is where we want to get to, but they'll decide, what's the worst that can happen? How can we avoid not ending up where we get to? But I'm just wondering whether people do that as part of their businesses anyway.
Okay. A question coming in there.
Thanks, Emily. A brilliant question. I would say evidence and monitoring on your own farm is a really good starting point. So I work a lot with hill farmers and commoners, and it's not just regen agriculturalists who are guilty. It's a human condition, as you pointed out. So I would suggest that actually measuring and both the financial and the production on your own farm, and then questioning that, and maybe using other people to help you question might be another way forward.
Can I briefly ask then, hands up, who does a lot of financial monitoring and KPI?
Okay, that's kind of 15% of the room,
Yeah.
very roughly.
I think
we're coming up to the last.
I think you really bring up a fantastic. I'm over here. I think you really bring up a fantastic point, and it's something that I began to worry about in the regen space. I've seen a lot of businesses go through a lot of change, and I think if there's one thing to do and be careful about is it's trials small and implement quickly.
Okay, I'm going to hold that there. We're running short on time. We're coming towards 5 minutes. There's 2 more questions to come. I think there's a question there, please. There's one there, then there's one there. There's 3 more. We're going to have to make it fast.
I think accepting failures is really important, like really accepting them and saying, this has gone wrong, okay? So I say grazing management, for example, for worming treatments, and we can do every single thing right, and then my client will still have to use a wormer, and I feel so disappointed. But actually just accepting that's okay, and then going again.
That's a very strong point. Go there for, yes.
Okay, I don't think we can avoid our biases. I'm definitely here partly because of desperately wanting to believe that this was going to work.
Okay.
We're part of a bigger system, and if we fail, then we're part of the testing process that eventually produces a result that might not be regen ag in the form we currently
But what risk
envisage
does
it.
that bring you?
Personally, a lot.
Okay.
But that's okay.
I think I was going to make a similar point. Is this not about adaptive management? Land management to me is about adaptive management and always has been. You try something, you review what you've done, you tweak it a bit the next year or the next cycle, the next season, and adjust and go on and review and so on. So it's quite a cyclical process, and I think that's learning, isn't it? That's how
But
we do
equally,
it. That's how land management's always done it.
Yeah, sorry, just briefly, how much actually, so very often, sometimes they recommend that you should think like a journalist, as in pull on multiple sources of information before quoting anything. Do you know what I mean? So widening your worldview about what might work and what not work, to enable you to avoid that problem of failure within.
Okay. I think there's a lot of stuff building. Miniature, please.
Very. Biases are expanded by the superstructure we exist in. So if we change the superstructure, work more in communities and with reciprocity, we will melt biases.
Final word to you, Emily, to wrap it up. Or you don't have to say anything, we can just say thank you to you.
I think I'll just leave it hanging.
Brilliant, because lots of questions coming up. Over to you, Pete.
I'd had a beer last night and somebody came up to me and said, would you speak for 5 minutes? It's like...
No, not 5.
2 minutes, whatever.
Yeah, 2. You're definitely 2 now.
And I'm now unprepared. So I do trees and hedges. I've worked for the Woodland Trust for a long time. And I set out to create woodlands. And I then started to meet people like Nick and Paul Renison and others in the regen sphere and had conversations about farming. And I knew nothing about farming. So I think I've got 2 points. One is farming needs to welcome other people in so that we can share our knowledges. Conservationists, I'm a conservationist, I'm into biodiversity. I now understand much more about farming and food production. So I've learned on that journey as well. So if it's a journey for me, I've learned about those things that I didn't know much about. So collectively, we need to learn from each other. That's point 1. Point 2, we need more trees in the landscape, please. And I'd like to have some conversations about trees. But we also need to learn what those trees, hedges, and that browse is doing for us in terms of our animals and our welfare. Claire's work on climate change is fantastic. We're looking forward to 2050, where we've got some extreme heat coming our way. We've got to resolve that. Best thing to do, put your cows under a tree. So any tree questions, hedge questions, things like that, but also remember that point about us learning from each other and being wide in our pool of expertise that we call upon.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. That was within 1 minute. So 2 challenges within 1 minute. Fantastic. Thanks, Pete. Let's go to the floor.
No question.
Okay, no. Yes.
Floor,
no, hang on. No, any more? I'm trying not the same people to speak. Yes, behind there. Nothing personal.
Mine's kind of a question back in the other direction, but how do we get past the perception that trees means land use change away from agriculture? Like, not just within the field of people that understand silvopasture, etc., but in the wider farming community?
It's a difficult one because obviously the regulation behind trees, you've got Forestry Commission, and we have the expectation that once you've created woodland, it's woodland. And therefore it's taken away from agriculture as we know it. So I think that's a problem we've got to get across. But my point would be that we need to learn from each other and see how those trees or woody structures add value to our farms, and then take that back to DEFRA and others and see these things as something we can manage, rather than necessarily being ring-fenced as a different item on the farm. I'm a strong advocate for field trees and hedgerows. We did a piece of work in the Woodland Trust, and half our canopy in the UK is not in woods. It's outside of woods. And that's the bit we're losing fastest. So a big tree goes over in a field, what happens? Somebody comes in, chops it up, firewood, takes it away, and doesn't replace it. But that tree had so many positive elements to it, whether it's shade or shelter, or whether it's water percolation, or whether it's that leaf fall that allows you to, that leaf litter is part of the field ecology. So we've got some big things there. Regulatory-wise, it's problematic if we start to put ring fences around trees. So we shouldn't do that. So we need to find arguments to make sure that doesn't happen.
Okay.
Question on that.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
No,
Hi, Pete. How do we get over our fondness for degraded landscapes? We have vast areas of utterly degraded, deforested landscapes that, yes, they've become a different habitat, but it's so protected because of people like looking at degraded landscapes.
Which country are you talking about? Are we talking about which country?
Here, the North Pennines, areas like that are absolutely
controversial,
degraded.
We could really go down that rabbit hole. What is someone's degraded landscape is someone else's UNESCO site? But we were talking about that. That's what I was doing last night. I was having my turn to provoke. So yes.
Yeah, no.
Anyone else? Oh, sorry. Before Pete, there is the ability for other people to respond to the audience, but I'm still going to watch the time. Anyway, do you want to comment? Do you want to comment on that, Pete? That particular point, or you can leave.
Yeah. How long have you got? So
but quick.
We need to look at why those landscapes are degraded. So there's a social construct around that, but a lot of it's funding-led. So we had headage payments in the uplands for a long time, which drove massive sheep numbers, which actually destroyed things like hefts and that traditional farm management. I'd like to go back to traditional farm management, which is carrying capacity. We go back to carrying capacity, proper animals in the right place, managed well. Then we can start to change that degraded system quite rapidly, I think. But it's a cultural thing. And in the lakes, we now have this World Heritage stuff, which is based on sheep grazing, but on sheep grazing in a modern context with headage payments, headage payments, something else, BPS. So somehow we have to go back to a point where farming was biodiverse and productive and it had people on the land, it had all that history and culture that was destroyed by some of those European grants, effectively. I think we need to change the system we've got now.
Okay. Look, we're coming towards the 5 minutes. There are 2 more questions, but they are questions from people who are going to be on the panel a bit later. These must be questions unrelated to what you're going to talk about when you're on the panel. Very quick. Very quick.
Just, Pete, based on a farm visit this week, for example, where one holding is owned, one holding is tenanted. They've gone for it with the owned farm, shelter belts, field trees, but the tenanted farm, very limited sort of implementation, and that is essentially because of the kind of recalcitrance from the landowner. I just wondered if you could speak to that.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to take the next question as well, because we're out of time, but a point about kind of landlord and tenant.
I read a book a while back, Rory Stewart, Politics on the Edge, and he talks about trying to get trees in the landscape by, I think he was giving 100 trees or 10 trees to every single farmer in the country and somehow allowing the single farm payment to getting those planted. And he came up against NGOs, Woodland Trust, National Trust, all of these organisations who want to use consultants to consult on every farm to where you should plant trees. How do you see sort of these organisations as being a barrier to actually getting trees in on the ground? Because he seemed very frustrated.
Yeah.
One
sentence.
There is a landlord and tenant issue. We need to get trees as being valued as part of farm. So it needs to go into the valuation of farms. And farmers tell me when you plant trees, you devalue the farmland. We need to get around that somehow and find a way forward. On your point, we do get in the way, but we're people. Yeah. We can be arseholes from time to time, can't we? So, we need to find ways where actually we talk to each other. So I get rid of all the stuff. The Woodland Trust is they pay me, but as far as I'm concerned, that's all they do for me. The rest is one-to-one, and we try and work with people. So I think you do need to degrade, using that word again, some of that bullshit around organisations and get to actually what do you want on your land and what's it going to do for you. Okay. And we need to get to that conversation as quick as possible.
That's a fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Big round of applause for Pete. Okay, the next 3. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Very good question. Please, Emily. May I give the floor to Emily?
Hi, again, it was last night in the bar and someone approached me and said we need to even up the male-female balance here. So that's why I'm here. It's the only reason why I'm here.
These days.
So I was going to talk to you about mob grazing because that's kind of what I'm interested in. And that's what we do on our farm down in Warwickshire, my husband and I. And just a few things have happened this year that have actually made me reevaluate certain things. And so I'm going to talk to you about how you actually value your regeneration instead of your farm and your livestock's regeneration. So when was the last time you looked into your microbiome, your sort of, we pay for all these tests to get what we have in our soils evaluated, and we get our blood tests for our animals to make sure we're giving them the right things. We're trying to cut out all antibiotic use, etc. But when was the last time you actually thought about what we're putting into our bodies? And I know I'm talking to the converted here, but we're sleepwalking into a massive health crisis, and a lot of us will have had personal experience with things like cancer and autoimmune disease, all of these things. And so my question is, how do we balance the workload of all of the exciting things we want to do on our farms and for our livestock and for our businesses and for our families and for the greater world's good, with taking the time to spend on regenerating ourselves and our health. So I'm just putting that out there, and that's that really.
Great, thank you. Wonderful, thank you very much for that. Okay, any thoughts? Anything that anyone wants to talk about? And there's lots of people at the back there. Don't forget, the microphone will stray everywhere. So put your hand out. Someone's already got the microphone. No? You just got the microphone. Yes, please, here. And then another microphone here next.
Yeah. Emily, no, you're fine. You don't need to stand. It's fine. Yeah, but I'm involved in a project north of the border called Farm Strong Scotland, which is about improving people's well-being. And there is so much research about how people's well-being benefits their business. And we're really bad in ag for having a culture of being a bit too heads down, bum up, and getting on with just being too busy, being busy fools. So, absolute kudos to what you said, because we need to take care of ourselves. We are the most important parts in our business. And yeah, I think there's a site, you are preaching to the converted, but the food we eat, etc., is really, really important as part of that well-being.
Okay, great, thank you for that. Sorry, do you want to say anything? I mean,
I was just...
obviously don't have to.
No. I just think we have to build that into our own routines, because for so many, changing our lifestyles, our diets, our sort of exercise regimes, our, the way we deal with stress management, especially in farming, because we all know that factors like stress affect our bodies and our immunity and lead, just exacerbate all these things. So it's about trying to reevaluate our businesses to build in time to enable for this sort of, all of these things really, yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah. So after this lady, yes.
Hi. Thanks, Emily. I think it's a really interesting space. In the past couple of years, I used to work on looking at chronic conditions, and then more recently I've been looking at regenerative farming. And what's really struck me is the crossover and parallels between the two. And I found some really interesting research which is linking soil microbiome to gut microbiome. And I think there's early movement within academic circles of exploring that. And I think it's more interconnected than we realise. And I'm fascinated to see how this room feels about this kind of shift of trying to be away from processed food, and if that conversation around health is something that's linked into driving them to farm more regeneratively.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, we'll go straight into, we'll roll into this question.
I'm just going to talk from my heart here. I've been in the
so hold the microphone to them.
So I've been doing mob grazing and looking after myself, and for many, many years now, many people probably recognise what David and myself do. But actually, last November, out of the blue, I, having been cycling in the Alps in July, developed an autoimmune lung condition, which came completely out of the blue. Lived a healthy diet, dealt with that. Was told that the best of my lungs will remain as they were. Then another condition, arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, appeared. I've dealt with that also. But the point of what I'm making is that if you do go through these moments, and they come without any warning whatsoever, and don't believe any of us are not going to experience this possibly at some point in their life. I could not believe it. I mean, I'd have a crap winter with the weather and my lung conditions. Anyway, pulled through it, and there's one thing I've learned, and I do a bit of yoga, but one thing I've learned, and I've read a book, and I think his name is James Nestor, and it's about how we breathe. And I have done an unbelievable amount of breathing exercises. And I mean, I would quite happily tell you that I walked into I walked into the local hospital mental health unit at midnight one night, came back, reevaluated things, read this book, and my lung capacity is increasing, and I pulled through it. So never, A, look after yourself, and B, never give up when things go against you, but pay attention to breath.
Fantastic. I think that book should be put on the website, Carbon Calling website. I think, we'll kind of somehow circulate that. 30 seconds on anything, or do you want to just leave it hanging?
I just want to leave it hanging.
Thank you very much indeed to Emily. That's great. Perfect. Thank you. Sam. Yeah. Go for it.
Good morning. I'm Sam Morris. I've come across from Singapore. I was an academic, and I was working on indoor farming, specifically on making soil substrates for them. But I became very frustrated at indoor farming, and so I quit in April with the idea of exploring regenerative agriculture in the UK, because I think the UK is exceptionally good at knowledge sharing. But upon my visits to Groundswell and to farmers and to other events, I found there to be a reasonable lack of data collection. And I'm curious, why? So I've got two kind of questions for you. The first one is, there seems to be a common understanding that the farmer knows their land best, and yet they don't seem to collect a lot of data to allow others to understand it too. And the second one is, I'd like to understand why there isn't more open source data within agriculture. Who contributes to large open source data repositories? That's it.
Brilliant. Well, this is mind-blowing in how many challenges, and the room is rising to the challenges, or may not do, because we haven't finished the session. So, yeah, open to the floor. Some great data. Yeah, hands going up there. Let's do one there, please. And then... oh, my goodness. Okay.
I don't particularly collect a lot of data. One, because it's a pain in the arse. And two, if you're ticking along nicely, there's no incentive.
Thank you. That's the kind of... We're looking for pithy contributions. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about lack of open source data. So I work for Pasture for Life, one of the best knowledge exchange organisations. Highly recommend you join. Half price membership today over at the stand. Anyway.
That's enough. This is not an
But what I would say about open source is we've put numerous applications into Innovate UK to create in-field methane sensing equipment to make sure that all of the data that comes from that is open source. And time again, we get rejected because I think that there's an underlying... I don't want to sound like too much of a conspiracy theorist, but the only equipment that is available to do that costs hundreds of thousands of pounds and has an annual subscription fee of tens of thousands of pounds. We want to make it open source, and there is definitely a sense that there is a lack of commercial viability of things that are open source, and particularly when you're looking at Innovate UK funding, they want you to be able to create a gadget and sell it. So there's definitely a disincentive from those who are funding innovative work and practice.
Okay. Thank you. Do you want to respond? I mean, you don't have to respond. We can. There's lots of hands going up, and then you can respond to whichever ones you want.
Two very quick ones. At UCL, there's some researchers looking at making open source data collection for bird monitoring and for soil monitoring, and also water quality. And they're trying to make it as cheap as possible using Raspberry Pis. And I found that to be probably the only example that I've found in the UK of doing that cheaply. And then the data collection side, I'm always curious, because in my mind, big companies want to collect your data to sell it for profit. So why don't you also sell your data for profit and make the narrative out of it? If you're increasing bird amounts by 200%, is that something that you can market?
Okay.
That's the question.
No, that's fine. I'm going to... Yes, please.
The most terrifying phrase you can hear is, "I've come from the government, I'm here to help." There's a big mistrust between farmers on the ground and government and big business.
Right.
You give them data, they sell it.
Okay.
You give them information, they use it to control what you do on your farm. So if we provide that information, then we expose ourselves.
Thank you. Yeah. We're going to go for the next question over there. We're on 4 minutes. We've got about 2 more minutes.
Just very quickly on that one. Is the problem... Sorry, I fall over. Is the problem that the currency for farmers is actually information rather than data, whereas actually for a lot of the research community, it's the data that they're actually wanting? I'm very much saying that what I need on the ground is actionable, timely information. Data may contribute to that, but data is a means to an end. Whereas I keep hearing people calling for data, And frankly, for me, data is a chocolate coffee spoon. It's the information that I need to make decisions with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, I work for Innovative Farmers, which we do kind of open source trials, and it's a bit more bottom up than a lot of other methods. I just wanted to say, I think in terms of, I think it's a question of the time that it takes to do data collection. So, you know, a lot of farmers are already time poor enough, and so that's just one aspect. But then also knowing what the hell to do with the results that you get back and how to interpret it. I mean, I had a conversation with a very well-known kind of soil health lab who didn't even know quite how to advise farmers on, they were looking for help on how to advise farmers on interpreting some more like soil microbiology type of results. So if they don't know how and kind of they're at the heart of it, then it does concern me.
Another question, we're coming towards the
I
end.
think it's a case of combining people that are working within industry. So there's many farmers in the room with researchers, and then trying to work together to build projects or actually utilise our skills for analysing data with your skills of the data collection, making that data collection easy for the farmer but also actionable as well, and then us as researchers translating that research back that's actionable on farm and also combines economics as well, so the farmer can see, why should I do this, why should I make these changes, but also very understandable for the end user as well.
Okay, great.
I'm loving this. This is great. Thank you.
Yeah. Is someone taking notes? Is this being recorded at all? No. Oh, it is being recorded, so at least okay, no, great. Okay, I think we're very short now. There's a hand up there, yes, please, there. And then I think I want to give Sam the final word, or you don't have to. Yes, please.
Some very quick shout-outs on open source. I think GrassCheck GB is amazing. You've got farmers across the UK, plate meter reading, and then they share grass growth rates across the country. So that's farmers working to provide information for other farmers. AHDB, Forage for Knowledge, great information sharing platform, always kept up to date, and I think they tie in with grass growth speeds. Talking about livestock farms there. Finally, our own company, Rumi, do satellite grass monitoring. Any farmer can use it for free, and we work very heavily to provide insights, not data. So a few quick shout-outs.
That's great. One very
Yeah, thank you very much for the shout out from AHDB. Just want to say that we are working on a data custodian project. So if anybody's got any ideas, please come and speak to AHDB. It's not called a repository just because that makes me quite squeamish.
Okay. Fine. Sam, do you want to say anything final, or you want to leave it hanging because there's lots of data to pick up on there? Information as well.
My hope in terms of the use of data and the time it takes to collect it is really the use of AI and machine learning to have automated data collection. And whilst its accuracy may be debatable, it is always consistent on your farm, so at least it aids you consistently. But thank you very much for giving all of your points. It's invaluable, I think. So
thank you very much, Sam. Great. That's fantastic. And thank you very much for you guys as well. Richard, the floor is yours.
Hi, Richard McLean, small family farm in North Yorkshire, and we've been putting all our hedges back into the 1890s boundaries. We discovered some old railway maps. Amazing funding from FIPL, Farming in Protected Landscapes, so sometimes up to 100% funding to put all our hedges back in. But I just wanted to share with you my experience with a lot of old hedges. How am I going to get them laid? And an engineering friend down Rutland Way, who was a very keen hedge layer, and he came up and did some training. I advertised an event for a weekend, and I do it every year now, and it brings together everybody from all walks of life. So last year, it was really enjoyable. There's a gamekeeper who, I asked him why he was there, wanting to learn about hedge laying. He's trying to bring back the English partridge, probably so he can shoot it. But also, talking to him as a good friend of mine from the Green Party, who's a councillor in York, who's like a vegan and massively anti-hunting. And bringing these two people together, talking about what they love, that both of them a complete passion for the countryside and a complete passion for nature. So my question to you is really, how do we bring communities together? For me, hedge laying is one of those things that seems to, and the British hedge seems to bring everybody together. we have a society full of division, it seems, at the moment. And for me, how do we stop that division and bring people from all walks of life together into the rural situation and, well, regenerate it? Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Anyone want to talk about bringing communities together over hedges, thorny or otherwise? Okay, first hand up here.
Second hand here.
Second hand there, yes. Okay.
I think it's really important to make spaces where it's okay for people to disagree. That's it.
Yep, no, that's okay. Space to disagree. Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Yes, please.
Yeah, I think something I picked up on earlier is kind of what's not helping the divide is the people who own the land are on one side, and then people who don't own land are on the other, kind of pointing the finger and saying, you should be doing X, Y, and Z, but because they don't have land, they don't really understand what actual land management involves, and they can't comprehend how complex, and you think of an entire system, not just one factor such as hedges or one factor such as birds. So I think that's where it really gets a bit too divisive, because you can't share that knowledge, and it's very much about how do you get everyone on an equal footing to then have a productive conversation.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, please.
I was just going to say, yay, hedges, awesome. I work in hedges and I think they're brilliant. But I think finding those areas that have multiple interests, and I think hedges are a really good start, because they interest birders, they interest mammal people, they interest farmers, because they have so many benefits. And I think if you come to it from one thing, you can start learning about the others. And I think sharing, exactly as you said, over those sort of common interests, I think is really important.
Yes.
Hi, so I've also been bringing a group of climate change activists together with a group of farmers in Teesdale. And to do it, I've just really developed relationships really slowly. We've had lots of cake, which helps. And we've been getting outside, we've been doing conservation tasks together and also having discussions, but we have to have an independent facilitator there. So it's really important to just create that really safe space for people. And take it really slowly and build trust. And actually listening is the most important thing in this situation.
Yeah.
I think cake is most important. I agree.
Cake, yeah. Cake is very important. The question over there, I'll come back.
I'd suggest that we need to start with younger children getting into the countryside more. There's lots of people in the country who don't have access to the countryside or feel they have access to the countryside, and actually normalising it among younger people will help establish those sort of better community links later on in life.
Okay, great. Thanks.
I'd just like to make the point about facilitation, which is that I think that's absolutely right. You need facilitators in the mix. I work for a charity who brings lots of people into the countryside. Eden Rivers Trust are here. We've done some hedge laying work with Eden Rivers Trust. But there are risks. In Keswick, we did a volunteer thing last winter with hedge laying, teaching local people how to do that. But people with axes, bill hooks, on cold, wet days, all ages, some massively unskilled with tools, there are risks. So it's brilliant, but...
Yeah, okay, yes. And then a microphone at the back, please, there. And then there.
So I run a nature reserve in Cumbria. It's 200 acres, and I guess just a little point to make, really. Our biggest problem is so many people want to be on that nature reserve. With 200 acres, we have about 110,000 visitors a year. And I think my point being in that is that there's so much opportunity for people to be more engaged if we're willing to open up areas and allow them to do it. Like you say, having volunteer days. We're inundated with people who want to be involved. Yeah. If we can find opportunities to make the most of that.
Okay.
Yeah, I've found that completely. We organised it on Eventbrite, and it's free, and we had 50 applicants for both days, Saturday and Sunday, and it wasn't for sale, but it was sold out, if you see what I mean, oversubscribed. And everybody giving their labour for free for cake and soup.
Okay. Great, thank you. Yes, please.
I ran a project in 2019 called What Are Britain's Uplands For? And it was just a discussion, debate. It was open to anyone. It was open to farmers, keepers, environmentalists, researchers, academics, whoever wanted to come along. And people thought we were a bit mad. The organisation I worked for, we were a bit mad to do it. It was kind of like putting all these people together in a, taking them out onto the hills. But we were going to have a massive Rammy, and we didn't. It was brilliant. Yeah. People talked to each other. People who would not know. So sorry, I'll try and cut this short.
Yes,
but
do.
It's great. It's just about, I think it's about not being afraid to get people with different opinions together, because actually they don't really beat each other up. They they do have sensible conversations.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, please.
I think it's just great that they all find out different things from each other, and they all learn like how each of them farm in different ways. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Great stuff. Right, I think we're coming. Again, we can keep going. Thank you very much for your valuable contribution. Do you want to add a last end point, or do you want to leave it hanging?
I think the main thing is that the perspective that I got is so much more brings us together than actually divides us. And it's that thing about it does offend me greatly that people seem to be driven apart by certain things, but actually that 90% we've got in common, and it's great to see that in that situation.
Sure. But the importance also is independent facilitators. So if anyone wants just a little job advert there, because it's really hard to do it because everyone wants to own the narrative with their confirmation bias. So it's nice to disrupt but not agitate. Richard, thank you very much indeed. Right, okay, I've got to focus now. Okay, the next three. Over to you, Niels.
Hi, my name's Niels Caulfield. So I say my sort of question for today is based around my monitoring work. I've now monitored over 200 farms right across the UK, and I can now say that I'm firmly convinced that poor soil health and poor pasture health is bringing systemic weaknesses to all farming operations, upland, lowland. It's the reason why we're housing for 6 months. It's the reason why we're burning off in summers, and it's the reason why growth is dipping off when it stops raining. So my question for you all is, who knows where they're at on their own farm? Who knows where their soil health is at, for example, and how do you know you're at where you're at?
Okay, short and pithy in 37 seconds. I know we've touched on data, but this is more about, isn't it, soil and knowing the condition of your soil and anything else around that. Hand up here. Yes.
Not a data man, not a record-keeping man. I know from walking around my farm how the soil feels under my feet, but more importantly, the best fields are considerably better and get better every year. I try and get the poorer performing fields to be as good as that, and you can just know from the amount of days each cow is on each cell. There's no science to this at all. It's just things will improve, but just monitor in your mind's eye how many days the cows tend to be in your best fields. And it's nothing magical. It's no science involved. It's just, I've been doing it for 12 years, and the best fields are continuing to get better, and the poorer fields are also getting better.
Okay, thank you for that.
So in your case, you think you're getting more grass, basically? Yeah.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, hands, random comments? Hand up there, please.
Hi, bit of an imposter, not a farmer, but having spent over £1 million trying to understand soil health, I think the question back to you and everybody else here is the way in which we monitor, whether it's microscopy, DNA or nutrition, because they all tell a different story. So I think my question is, when you are monitoring, how you do monitor to understand it and then look through all the data. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Any other? We can roll on. There's a hand up there, please. We're going to finish in about 15 minutes, but I've got another panelist to do, so we're going to move it fast. Because we started at 10, we've got about 1 hour. Yeah. Go. Very quick points, we're going to keep moving.
Niels, do you think there's a limit to soil health? Where's the end game at the end of the day? Is it the same as the edge of the field? And also, do you think it could be too technical? is there anything wrong with just a spade, your nose, your eyes, and your senses at the end of the day? Because there's so much low-hanging fruit there before we get into the technical side that I can do in my farm before I get to the technical side and the data and so on.
Okay.
Maybe I'll come back on that one.
Yeah. Okay. I'm kind of in my earpiece. The organiser's saying, kind of roll it on, Rob, roll it on, which so I'm trying to. But I can sense there's a little bit of energy in the room. And I want to give these guys space. There's a very quick question there. Then we're going to move on to the next panelist.
Is it kind of, it's kind of giving jobs for the boys, kind of this data harvest and collection. If it is that thing of just didn't put shit on your fields, like didn't put chemicals and kind of all the stuff what is degrading the soil, just didn't use it, and then you'll regenerate cell anyway, kind of because that's what it does. Like, if we left the soil alone and didn't farm it, it would regenerate itself. Like, so it's managing how to use farming within that system. But it seems that all this data and all the harvesting, it's probably negative because the farmer doesn't. It's like what your man said over there. It's like if you're walking on the land and you know the land, you would use that rather than data harvesting.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that. I think we're going to wrap it up now, Niels. Do you want to say any final words or just leave it hanging?
Well, just quickly to say that, monitoring science, get rid of all those terms. Step one, monitor, observe. Look, feel, see. The more you look, the more you see, the more you understand. And if you value something, then you've got to look at it in order to know whether you're achieving it.
Okay. A round of applause for Niels, please, there. Okay, Megan, just a couple of words, just a couple of minutes.
Yeah, okay. So I'm a hedge geek, but I'm also a wood pasture geek and a traditional orchards geek. The things that unite them is their woodland edge habitats. We have them because they're amazing for our farming, and they always have been. But they're also really good for wildlife because they mimic the structure of what we had before, our ancient wildwood. We don't have much of our ancient wildwood left, so the genetic diversity of our tree populations tend to be in our ancient hedgerows, our ancient wood pastures. How, in this wonderful drive that we've got to be putting new kilometres of hedgerows in, new all of this, how are we going to make sure that we also have time to make sure that the genetic diversity in our ancient hedgerows, in our old hedgerows, is carried forward into the next generation? Particularly within hedgerow trees. Hedgerow trees are obviously the ones that flower and fruit. They're the mast ones that get all of those seeds out for natural regeneration. How do we make sure that we're making that next generation of hedgerows, wood pasture, as genetically diverse as we can to make sure it's future-proof for climate change?
Okay. Thank you very much. There's the pithy challenge, but we can go. There's a couple of hands. Yes, let's just keep it going quick because I'm getting pressure in my right ear.
Allow hedges to encroach out into the pasture a bit. Don't be so clinical about cleanliness. It's one major thing.
Okay, hold it up. Okay, allow hedges to encroach into the wood.
We have
into the field.
We have quite a lot of shelter belts, monoculture shelter belts, which went in from the 50s through to to now, but they're more diverse now. I'm having an enormous amount of fun putting the understory in. So what we do is with the kids and visiting kids, particularly good job for school visits, collecting the seeds from the hedgerows and broadcasting them into the woods. It's bloody good fun. It's really easy, and it's a good message for the kids.
Like that, messy fun. Very quick over there, please.
Can I quickly come back on that?
Absolutely do.
Are you using anything to prep the soil first, or are you getting good recruitment just with broadcasting? Oh, fabulous. Great.
Yeah. Okay.
No pigs necessary.
Just from a seed collection point of view, if you want as much genetic diversity as possible, I don't think making seed collection easy from hedgerows necessarily makes it as good for wildlife. Like, you lose some of that when you space it out to make it easy to collect from. And I don't think a lot of people think of seed collection as like a necessary part of that. But if you want genetic diversity, you need to be able to collect seed. And to do that, you have to not let it become this massive shrub like people talk about, letting it encroach onto land and stuff. But yeah, they'll make it easy to collect from.
Okay, thank you very much. Any more, I think? Do you want to do a little wrap up? Oh, there's a question here. Yes, please.
Just a quick point. Yeah, we're setting up a small tree nursery up in North Cumbria, and we're collecting our own seed and also working with children to do that. And plant trees as well. So yeah,
Okay, so
local tree nurseries.
Great. So lots of slave labour out there using children to cast seeds everywhere. Megan, any final outtake?
Absolutely. I think making sure that genetic diversity gets into the next generation is absolutely crucial, but I think looking after the hedges that have that genetic diversity is also crucial. So there's a massive drive for new hedges. My mantra at the moment is if you're going to plant one, lay one, because a lot of our existing hedges, the ancient, the old ones, a lot of them are overstood, a lot of them need that rejuvenation that they haven't seen in recent decades. So plant one, lay one is if I can get that earworm stuck in.
Thank you very much, Megan. That's fantastic. Okay, Stuart, a couple of minutes on whatever you want to get off your chest.
Hi everyone, Stuart Johnson, local farmer, work with Understanding Ag as well. I've been completely thrown under the bus here, so bear with me. I'm going to throw this straight back at you.
No, exactly. Or we can get someone else up to
as
replace
someone who
you.
is doing a bit of educating, as someone who has gone down the different methods of understanding these changes that need to be made. I'm just going to throw it straight out in the audience and say, how do you guys want to learn how to change? Do you want to be thrown into the science of it? Do you want to go basic principle-led? What's the best way for you lot to understand? For us as farmers is to understand how it is that we're going to sort of bring this change about that we all think needs to happen.
I think one of the biggest things is peer-led, practical, like this is what we do and this is what works. Like at the moment we're kind of like the regenerative agriculture thing, and agriculture in general is like death by consultant. There's literally, I mean, I'm not being funny, but I'd imagine more than half people in this room probably tout themselves as consultants. Like you go everywhere and it's like, hi, I'm a consultant, which is great, but it's much more beneficial to go to someone who's like, right, this is what I do and it works really well, but we've had a few of these problems. Oh, cool, well, I'm going to try that and actually have these. And maybe you need a consultant to bring together those groups, maybe. But, you know, paying someone a load of money to tell you is very different than going to have a beer or a coffee with somebody and them show you.
Okay, thank you for that.
Liked it, good.
Okay, any more? Stuart, I mean, you could be in the clear. There's again more. No, yes, please. I mean, I'm battling between the time that I've been told to close this down, but also the room is unfinished. So,
I think the farmer-led conversations, and so actually the groups around meeting with other farmers, the ones that regenerate outcomes hold. So actually getting there, bringing a load of farmers around, and so you can ask questions, and then you can. It's that whole debate, isn't it? Then you can see, you can feel, you can understand, you can ask as many questions as you want. I think that's probably the best way to learn for anyone, really, is it not?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, ask as many questions as you want. Alas, we haven't got the time for that. I think I'm going to say, Stuart, thank you very much for that provocation, especially when he didn't know he was going to be in the hot seat at the Dragon's Den. So thank you very much, Stuart. I think we're going to wrap it up there. Yes, I think, does anyone want to say anything? Now, I know there were maybe a couple of other people coming up to have a bit of a hot seat. That sounds really bad. Can we not record that? Anyone, would you like to say something? Can we just let it go a bit messy? Any particular comments that people want to say as a result of what we've discussed, or just want to say it, but it's got to be in 15 seconds-ish? Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I can do 15 seconds. I'm Alex. Nice to meet you all. I'm here to get your input on what I should build. I come from a farming family, and I work in tech startups in London. On Monday, I quit my job with the ambition of building a product to help farmers. I don't want to waste my time building something that you don't want. So I wanted to take this opportunity to do a vote in this room to tell me honestly if the two ideas I have are a waste of time or if you think I should look at them. So I'm going to give you two ideas, and then I'm going to ask you to put up your hands. And then my other challenge is, if you're interested in them, come and chat to me. Anyone who wants to talk, I'll buy you a pint, because I just want to learn from this room today.
Okay, so your first question, and it's got to be very quick.
First question, idea number one, an online grants platform that gives you a list of everything that is eligible for your farm system, so you don't have to do the research. You decide what you want, we apply. Idea one, grants platform. We'll do the voting in a second, like the enthusiasm. Thanks, guys. Option two is an app that helps with collecting evidence for compliance. There's lots and lots of evidence you've got to put together. we will tell you in a checklist exactly what you need and create an easy way for you to store that and organize it, and then you can export it and send it to the RPA, so there's no data sharing. So 2 ideas. Okay, votes for number 1, the online grants platform. Hands up and wave them high.
And that's run by the government?
No.
No, it's not.
No, absolutely not. So I quit my job.
A private.
Farmers building for farmers, okay?
So it's about 30%, maybe
Thanks, Rob.
40% in the room there.
Excellent. And option number 2, the compliance platform.
Okay, slightly less. We're
Slightly
getting,
less.
Kind of 15% on that. Okay, very roughly.
Brilliant.
Okay, well,
come find me later. Thanks,
there
guys.
we are. Thank you very much indeed, Alex. That's great. Alexander, that's great. Okay, yes, over there, yeah. Okay, we're coming towards the end now. Yes, please.
Yeah, sorry, I feel like I'm dragging the mood down a bit now, but I just wanted to make an appeal, really, or a defence for science. So I'm hearing quite a lot of negative things about data. But let's remember that science is a tool that can be used well and can be used badly. It can be used to drive certain agendas, both for good and for less good approaches. So please let's remind ourselves that data already supports the things that we're already using and knowing what to do. So yeah, maybe a shout out for good data and good data practices.
Great. Great. Okay, I think that is that, unless someone's hand's flying up through the asbestos roof, which is you've had your chance, I'm afraid. Okay, guys, I'm going to say thank you very much to all the panelists who came up and spoke, and also a massive thank you to you, the audience, for putting your hands up and for interacting so openly and so freshly. And thank you very much, obviously, for Carbon Calling for providing this space. So thank you again, and that's it. Thank you.
So it's an absolute pleasure to be here. And I look forward to the afternoon session as well, out in the field, because that's really where everything happens, right? So this morning, what I hope to do is just to be able to introduce you to, some of the key things that we're going to be talking about when we go out to the field session and why they're so critically important. But as Matt said, I'm one of the founding partners of Understanding Ag. Gabe Brown and myself founded that company along with the Soil Health Academy, and our most recent launch 3 years ago was another company called Regenified. So what I can tell you is that the interest in regenerative agriculture is growing very rapidly, and it is expanding globally. So it's not just limited to the US or North America or here in the UK or Ireland or wherever, but we're seeing this expanding everywhere around the globe. And the interest is absolutely exploding, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And today out in the field, we'll share some of those and why people are looking at this so heavily now. I am a lifelong farmer and rancher. I was born and raised on my family's farm in the state of South Carolina. I represent the 6th generation. Our farm has been there since 1840. And the 8th generation is active on the farm as we speak. So I value that heritage, and that's one of the reasons I do what I do. But I also spent a bit of time in academia. So I was a university researcher and professor for 15 years. So I clearly understand the research side, the data side, that type of thing. And that experience was valuable to me in terms of what I do today, because it helps me to integrate every facet of what we're talking about and what we do relative from practical production, boots on the ground, knowledge and information, to tying in critical data to help us make the right decisions. So what I want to share with you today is a bit about what we have developed over the course of time as we have consulted globally and worked on a very large amount of acres. So Understanding Ag in the U.S. alone currently works on a little more than 35 million acres now. and globally on more than 50 million acres. We're working in 45 plus countries, and what I'm going to share with you today works, the principles that I'm going to share work in every conceivable environment. How do we know that? Because we've worked in every conceivable environment around the globe. And they work in every type of agricultural enterprise, cropping, livestock, it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter what type of cropping or what type of livestock. These principles work and work extremely well. The only question then is, how do you implement them within your individual farm context? That's really the question. So let me share this from you. When we were in Ireland all this past week doing an academy, and one of the things that kept coming up was the economic situation with farmers there and the poor condition of the economics. And, well, it's not just there and it's not just here. Take a look at the U.S. for this year. Okay, so we're anticipating that there will be a $40 billion decline in the farm economy in the U.S. this year. That's a 25% decline from last year. And why? Well, two main things. There'll be about a $21 billion decline in cash receipts and a $17 billion rise in expenses and input cost. So those input costs and those reductions are driven by lower crop prices, reduced government payments, and higher costs for storage, marketing, transportation, and labor. And here's the other thing that's happening. So they just came out with the news about what's happening with the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, and this has become an annual event. And this year it's greater than 6,700 square miles. That's the 12th largest dead zone on record in the Gulf of Mexico. And that takes up, to put that in perspective, that takes up more than 4 million acres of ocean. So what does that mean? What's a dead zone? That means that marine life has a very hard time existing in over 4 million acres of ocean in the Gulf of Mexico. And the principal driver of that are two things. It is the agricultural runoff, and it is the commercial and residential lawn and park and golf course and so forth runoff. In the U.S., there's more than 43 million acres of commercial lawns, residential lawns, parks, golf courses, and that type of thing that a lot of chemicals are used on. So that contributes to this also. So you got to have a definition for regenerative agriculture, and this is ours. We feel like, because this is what we do every day and we do this globally, that we are qualified to define it. And our definition is, it is farming and ranching in synchrony with nature to repair, rebuild, revitalize, and restore ecosystem function, starting with life within the soil, and that's the most critical part. We got to start with life within the soil and then expanding to life above. And I love this quote, and I use it every time I speak and every time I'm in the field. And I'm going to illustrate this to you this afternoon when we're out in the fields. But the quote is from W.C. Loudermilk, and it goes like this: "The land does not lie. It bears a record of what men write on it, a record that is easy to read by those who understand the simple language of the land." So in the field session this afternoon, we're going to show you how to understand the simple language of the land. And we also use this quote a lot from Don Campbell, originally from Stephen Covey. But the quote is, if you want to make small changes, change the way you do things. But if you want to make major changes, we've got to change the way we see things. And in agriculture, as farmers and ranchers, there are really two types of compaction that we deal with. We deal with the compaction in the soil beneath our feet, and we deal with the compaction between our ears, right? So those are the two principal types of compaction that we deal with and we have to overcome. So for us, this is now what it's all about. Now, Gabe and I both, years ago, we were conventional farmers. So we used synthetics, we used chemicals, we did all of that. We did tillage, every bit of it. And so, in essence, every day we were waking up really thinking about, okay, what am I going to kill today? What type of side am I going to use? What am I going to do? But now we wake up every day thinking about what kind of life are we going to support and facilitate today? That is really what it's all about. And it's about this. It's about restoring a fully functioning carbon cycle and about creating this explosion of life, again, starting with the life beneath our feet within the soil and expanding to life above. So we find very clearly that as we move along the progression from what we call conventional or continuous grazing to adaptive grazing, and I'm going to share with you what that really means when I use the term adaptive grazing, we find that life begins to explode, starting again with that life within the soil and expanding to the life above. So through the years of doing this, what we have done is we have come up with what we now call the 634. And those are the 6 principles of soil health. I'm not going to take much time at all this morning going through these. We're going to illustrate them out in the field instead. But very quickly, they are know your context. Now that's principle number 1, and it's critically important. Because if you don't first understand your context, you're not going to be able to adequately and profitably apply the other 5 principles. Because these other principles, if you're applying them outside of context, they're not going to work. They only work within context. So the second one is minimize disturbance. The third is keep the soil covered or armored. And boy, is this one that we're hugely guilty of globally. And out in the field, I'm going to share some more reasons why that is so important to us. Fourth is diversity. Mix it up. We got to have a lot of diversity out there. The fifth is living roots in the soil at all times. And then finally, animal integration. Absolutely any time that we can accomplish that. And then there are the 3 rules of adaptive stewardship. And again, I'm going to cover these more thoroughly out in the field where we can illustrate them. But the first is the rule of compounding. The second, the rule of diversity. So there's diversity again. It's one of the 6 principles, and it's one of the 3 rules. So maybe it's a little bit important. And then the third is the rule of disruption, which I will cover in more detail here in a moment. And the 6 principles and the 3 rules exist to capture and support the 4 ecosystem processes. So in agriculture, what has happened to input cost over the last several years? Have they gone up or down? Up? Up a little bit? Up a lot, right? Up a lot. Globally. These are the 4 things that are free to us and always have been free to us. So might we ought to think about how do we maximize the capture of the things that are still free to us? And they are the energy flow, energy cycle, photosynthetic activity, photosynthetic capture. If we're not capturing sunshine, I call that wasted sunlight or photosynthetic leakage. And we'll take a look at that as we get out into the field and we'll evaluate that. How good are we doing at capturing sunshine? The second is a water cycle, and this is a very broken cycle globally now. It is a cycle we need to radically restore. The third is a mineral cycle. Again, a very broken cycle now. And here we go again with diversity. So diversity is one of the principles, it's one of the rules, and it's one of the 4 ecosystem processes. So let me share with you, before I dive into the 3 rules there of adaptive stewardship, some of the different trials that we've done in very different environments. And we've got many of these case studies. I'm only going to share a few with you this morning to illustrate, but on our website at understandingag.com, you can go there and you can see a lot of case studies that we have published. So first and foremost, I want to show you this. So this is a compilation of data that we have collected from quite a few clients, farms, and ranches from many different environments and ecosystems and different types of agricultural enterprises. And I want to share with you the timetable that we have found to be very definitive in terms of how quickly we can develop that incredibly important component of soil aggregate. If we don't do that, we're not making progress, because that's one of the keys to absolutely everything else that goes on in the soil. So the pictures that you see here are shovel testing. We're going to do this out in the field today. But they are pictures of initial shovel tests on these client farms and ranches when we first started working with them. So take a look at those. I want to know how many of you think that that is healthy soil or unhealthy. Healthy? Anybody? Unhealthy? Okay, thank you. I was hoping nobody would raise your hand on the first one saying this is healthy soil, okay? This is not. It's plated and compacted, lacks aggregation, lacks functionality, lacks water cycling and mineral cycling, all of that. So this is not very good functional soil. This is not what we want it to look like. And here again, what it looked like initially in year one. But 4 years later, here's where many of them are. They now have highly aggregated and deeply aggregated soil. And I'm going to share with you the data that shows how quickly they achieved this and what went into that. So in year one, at the end of year one, with their progress, we measured that they had built 2.3 inches or 5.8 centimeters of aggregate. By year two, they had increased that to 4.5 inches. By year three, to 6.2. Now, that's pretty good linear progress, right? That's linear progress. And we want progress. But look at what happened in year four. They took a big leap, jumped from 6.2 to 14.7 inches. Now, that's a radical improvement within just a year. But with every one of these farms, we told them in year three, when we collected that data, if you continue with implementing the principles, you are right at the edge, the precipice of making exponential progress. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened in year four. Now, why? Why did that happen? Here's the reason. You have to first build enough critical mass of biology in the soil before you can then get that exponential benefit or leap in the function of the soil. So it took them years 1, 2, and 3, even though they were still making progress. Okay, so that's the other thing. It wasn't like they were holding static. They were making progress. But it took them that 3 years to reach that critical biomass of living, active microbes in the soil, and especially building enough mycorrhizal fungi, okay, that's a core component, to then take that leap. So what are the other things that occurred there? So over that 4-year time period, they saw an increase in total fungi of an average of 176%. Mycorrhizal fungi increased to 153%. Saprophytic fungi by 199, and plant species diversity by 123% over the 4-year time period. Now, here's the key, though, on that plant species diversity. They didn't plant a single seed. Every bit of that improvement in plant species diversity came from the existing latent seed bank that was already there, and they never knew that it was there and it was accessible. And they hadn't seen it before with the way that they were managing prior. But all of a sudden, when you build this deep, highly aggregated soil, that is the conduit, the facilitator for allowing the seed bank to begin to express itself. And can you do that here? Yes, you can. Okay? Yes, you can. And again, we'll talk about that out in the field as well, and how you know about how rapid that progress can be. What are some of the other benefits? Well, they saw significant improvement in water infiltration and retention, greater forage biomass production, more plant species, insect and bird diversity. And I will have to say, In the times that we've been coming to Ireland and the UK, that is one of the things that we noted from the very first trip that we made, was honestly the lack of birds and insects, okay, compared to what we're used to. So far, far, far fewer insects and birds than what we're used to seeing in regenerative situations. So, but folks, they can return, okay? And you can splatter your windshields once more, all right, as you drive through the countryside. So, better animal health, enhanced animal performance, and better nutrient cycling. So all of those were benefits that we derive from the improvement in the soil. And here's a farm in upstate New York that in the same 4-year time period, one of our clients, so, you know, and this 4-year time period for them was 2020 to 2023. You'll note that their pH improved from 5.7 to 6.9, and they applied nothing. So there was no lime purchased, nothing purchased to apply to the soil to improve the pH. This was purely through microbial remediation. That was it, to improve that pH. Their soil organic matter was already pretty good at a 7.3, but it increased to an 8.9. If you look at total living microbial biomass, an increase in that. Look at total fungi, a huge leap in that. An increase in mycorrhizal and saprophytic, and a 3 times increase in protozoa in the soil. Now, let's go to the Central Valley of California for our next example. How many of you have been to the Central Valley of California? Okay, a few of you. Okay. So, what's happening there today in the Central Valley? It's rapidly desertifying, and it's very disheartening. We do a lot of work out there, and every time we go out there and we see this, it really saddens us, because this once was an incredibly vibrant region that is just turning into desert. But it's turning into desert because of the way it's been farmed over the last several decades. And this is what you can see for mile after mile. Those are almond and walnut orchards. Does that look healthy to you? Please say no. Don't anybody say yes. Okay, so no. I mean, but they're taught to do it this way. Why are they taught to do it this way? Because they are told that if they have anything growing under the trees, it'll rob the trees of nutrients and water. Wow, how did we ever come to that conclusion? And what science backed that up? You know, that was hugely erroneous science. This is a university, their orchard, one of the key universities out there, and they're teaching these growers how to do this. And the people you see out there are one of our Soil Health Academy classes. So the university actually allowed us to come into their research orchard and teach. But we tried to do a shovel test there. And I said the word tried. We really needed a pickaxe, okay, to get through the shovel there. We stuck an infiltration ring in the ground. And 2 hours later, all the water was still in the ring. It wasn't in the ground. And then we found out from the university researchers here that they were spraying these orchards with some type of side, an average of 12 to 15 times a year. Boy, you really want to eat those nuts, don't you? Okay? So, and applying copious amounts of synthetic fertility and irrigation. Okay? So can you do it differently in the same Central Valley? Well, the answer is yes. And here's an example. So this is one of our clients' orchards. This is Daniel Unruh. He attended a Soil Health Academy in 2018. And when he attended the academy, his orchard looked just like the pictures I just showed you. Okay? But he was having tons of problems. He wasn't making very much profit at all, very narrow profit margins, lots of nematode issues with his trees. And he said, okay, I'm bought in. I'm going to do this. And Daniel, to his credit, dived in. You know, some people sort of dip their toe first, you know, into it, but Daniel didn't. He just did a cannonball into regenerative ag. And so immediately after he left the academy, he planted this highly complex and diverse mix of cover crops into his orchard. And all of his neighbors thought he had lost his absolute ever-living mind. You know, and like, what do you think you're doing, Daniel? You're ruining your orchard. But he planted all of this in there, and then he did this. Now they really thought he was crazy, okay? So he added sheep into the orchard. Wow, what a novel idea. And so now the sheep are moved daily under poly wire. And by the way, they're a second revenue stream off the same acres. So he doesn't have to pay more taxes, buy more land, any of that. And yet now he's got another revenue stream. And he's added another revenue stream by adding beehives there to sell honey and all of that. And guess what? That honey is outstanding because with all the diversity in there now, boy, do they have a lot to forage on, not just the blossoms on the trees. So what is the result of that? Well, he has had a significant reduction in any type of reliance on irrigation and pesticide use. Now, that's critically important in California because of the water issues. The sheep are now providing all of his fertility, so he doesn't have to buy and apply synthetic fertility anymore. And both his trees and his nut crops are far healthier. And he was selling into a commodity market, but instead of having to do that, what he's doing now is he's direct marketing everything. And he's even added value-added products like walnut oil and things like that. So now his revenue and his net profits have shot way up compared to all of his neighbors. But guess what? None of his neighbors have changed yet because they still think he's crazy. But Daniel is sort of laughing all the way to the bank. He doesn't matter how crazy they think he is. Here's another one of our clients, the Burris Family Farm, and they're doing something very similar, and they just hosted a Soil Health Academy back in late April. And we had an outstanding group of people there from around the world learning how to do this in the orchard setting at the Burris Family Farm. Now, this is in Michigan, so orchard again, and we were working with orchard growers up there in Michigan. Most of these are fruits, so apple, cherry, peach, pear, that type of thing. And this was yet at another university research station that they were hosting this workshop that we were teaching. So we went there and we were teaching this, and we did our classroom session. Then we went out in the field, and you know, you can see that they think they've got to maintain the bare tree row. And even the researchers believe they have to do that. So they're maintaining religiously this bare tree row with the grassy strips in between, but they're not wanting the grass to grow up very much, so they keep it mown. We want it to grow, but they keep it mown. But even though they were doing that, we did the shovel test first. And if you look at the soil from here compared to the soil here in the tree row. So the soil here at least had some life, some level of aggregation, some function to it. But the soil in the tree row was heavily crusted on the surface. It was cracking, and it was just 64 degrees Fahrenheit or almost 18 Celsius that day. No aggregation whatsoever. It was plated and compacted. I got to ask you this. Where is the cash crop? Where is it? Where the soil is halfway decent or where the soil looks crappy? And we asked them that. Where is your cash crop growing? In the worst soil. Why? Why do you want that? So the next thing that we did, so it was 64 degrees Fahrenheit that day, and they thought that was a hot day, and y'all may think that too. I'm from Mississippi, we call that winter, okay? So here on the grassy strip, it was 63 degrees Fahrenheit, but over here in the tree row, it was 99. Now, one of the things that those orchard growers said, and we overheard them talking to each other, they were worried because it was 64 degrees that day, and they were like, wow, we're still in April, we've still got a chance up here in Michigan of frost and freezes. This will cause our trees to bud, and then we'll lose it. We'll lose our crop because we get a late freeze, right? So they were all worried about that. And we looked at them and then looked at this, And we pointed our thermometer at it again and said, 99 degrees, guys. Your trees think it's 99. Why do you think? This is not a problem with the weather or nature, folks. This is a problem with us. Again, the compaction between the years. Okay, and these are multi-generational orchard growers. They had never even once considered the impact on their trees and the budding on the soil temperature in the bare tree rows. Not even once. That's why their trees were budding earlier. That's why they're having those problems and losing crops. This was in Delaware, and this was at a grower this was his first year of attempting doing some cover cropping and no-till and that type of thing. And so this is where he had planted a cover crop and rolled it down and then no-till drilled his corn or maize into that. And then in the same field, so this was right over here in the same field, to the right of this part of the field, he didn't do that. He didn't plant the cover crop, okay? And he just no-till drilled into that. So it was 85 degrees Fahrenheit that day. It was 73 in the soil here that was protected and covered, and 124 degrees there. Where do you think the corn's going to perform better? So now I want to share with you a study that we've done with a whole team of scientists, and it's a multi-state study in the U.S., and we're repeating that now in another region of the U.S., but this happened to be done in the southeastern portion of the U.S. in multiple states where we have paired comparisons. So we looked at doing this on farms that were operating regeneratively and taking a whole host of measurements over the several years of this trial, and then a neighboring farm that was operating very conventionally. And we just told them, keep doing things the way you're doing. Don't change anything. Just keep doing what you've been doing during the course of the trial. We're just going to pop in multiple times a year with our team and collect data. And that's exactly what happened. So I'm going to share with you what we found. And this is documented in the documentary Roots So Deep by Peter Bick. So if you haven't seen that yet, please take advantage of that. You can stream it. You can go to the website, rootsodeep.org, and stream the docuseries. It's a 4-part docuseries. So one of the things that we did was we put up eddy covariance flux towers. How many are familiar with a flux tower? Okay, good, several of you. All right, so these flux towers can actually do a whole host of things. One of the things that they do is measure greenhouse gas emissions, the flux of greenhouse gases. So we were measuring carbon dioxide, we were measuring methane, we were measuring nitrous oxide, okay? They're also a complete weather station, so we can measure all aspects of the weather, and they have a soil temperature and moisture probe, so we were measuring that. And all of this data is 24/7, 365 streaming data. So it's constantly giving you graphical data at all times. So we could look at every impact of everything that we did. So if we moved cattle into graze or sheep into graze or whatever, we could see exactly how they impacted it and impacted it over time, okay? How did it change our greenhouse gas fluxes? So, and we actually have a couple of these on our farm in Mississippi now, where we're collecting our own on-farm data on this. So here's what we found, okay, is that the regenerative farms were a 4 times more powerful greenhouse gas sink compared to the next door neighbor conventional farms, drawing down an average of 12.1 tons per hectare per year compared to 2.9 for the conventional. Now, the good news is the conventional farms were still a sink, okay, so that's good. But the regenerative farms were a 4 times more powerful sink. We also noted 3 times more grassland bird species and in total numbers as well on the regenerative farms compared to their direct next door neighbors. Now, a bird can fly. They can go wherever they want. So why? Why were There are 3 times more and 3 times more species on the regenerative farms when all they had to do was hop right over here to be on the neighbor. Habitat, right? We also found 33% more insect species diversity on the regenerative versus the conventional, and 25% more microbial soil species diversity that were living in active. And effective rainfall, what we call effective rainfall, and this is very powerful. And it's just as important here as it is where we were doing this trial. As a matter of fact, this is critically important all over the world. Effective rainfall. What does that mean? That's rain that actually goes into the soil, okay? Instead of ponding and pooling and evaporating or running off and creating erosion and harmful runoff and those types of things. So what we found is that the regenerative farms were at 2.3 times more, or they infiltrated 2.3 times more rainfall per acre per hour, compared to the conventional. And again, next door neighbors. Now, what does that mean? That extra 2 inches per acre per hour is an additional 54,000 gallons of water per acre that they are storing in their soil compared to the direct, again, next door neighbor. So how does this impact flood events, positively or negatively? Positively, exactly. How does it impact drought events? Positively. Now, what do you call a drought over here? So, 6 weeks? We call that a blip on the radar. For most of us, it's a year or longer without rain before we consider it a drought. But why? Why, folks? Why 6 weeks and it's a drought? Lack of ability to capture and infiltrate and store that water. Okay? Lack of an ability to do that. The good news is, though, we can repair that. Remember the data I just showed earlier? Okay? About building soil aggregate? That's how we do it. So we know we can do it pretty rapidly. So, now for the final part of my presentation, I'm going to dive into these 3 rules of adaptive stewardship and give you some examples of those and some very practical applications. So again, the rule of compounding, the rule of diversity, and the rule of disruption. Now the beautiful thing is that no matter what you're grazing, it doesn't matter, or even what kind of crop you're growing, these rules apply. And they apply equally well. Now, I need to start off by saying this when I talk about adaptive grazing. Here's what it is not, because I don't want any confusion here at all. Okay? So I'm going to be as clear as I can possibly be. Adaptive grazing is not mob grazing and always leaving 50%. It's not. Adaptive grazing is not total grazing. Adaptive grazing is not MIG, or management intensive grazing. It is not take a third, leave a third, and trample a third. And it is not rotational grazing. It is none of those. None of those describe adaptive grazing. Every one of those may be a momentary component of adaptive grazing. Okay? But not a single one of those is adaptive. Why? Because every one of these is prescriptive in nature. They are prescriptive. And the one thing that regenerative is and adaptive is non-prescriptive. And here's our litmus test, one of our litmus tests, to determine if somebody is doing a regenerative agriculture truthfully or if they're trying to teach it truthfully. If you're implementing a prescriptive methodology, it's not regenerative because it can't be, okay? If you're being taught a prescriptive methodology, I don't care what terms are being used, it is not regenerative. So regenerative and adaptive are completely non-prescriptive. Why? Because the very moment you apply a prescription is the moment you are dooming yourself to hitting a wall over time. And then you'll wonder why you hit that wall. It may take you 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, but you're going to hit the wall. And you're going to stop making progress, and you're going to wonder why. Because initially, when you tried something new, it worked. And then you said, this works, so I'm doing this from now on. So you turned a disruption into a prescription. And that's why it quit working. So we're going to talk a lot about that. So it's not any of those. So let's start with the rule of compounding. This is a rule of recognition. So the first thing we have to understand is that there are no singular effects ever out here in real life and real nature. And oh, by the way, what's the term that has been bandied about in agriculture and by governments and universities and companies for the past 2+ decades? Sustainable. I hate that term. There is no such thing as sustainable agriculture. It doesn't exist, never will. What is the very definition, folks, of sustainable? Maintaining status quo. I'm sorry, you can't do that. When you're dealing with nature and biology and weather, you cannot maintain status quo. And oh, by the way, neither can you or I. Okay? I may wish to be 30 for the rest of my life, but I'm not. Okay? And every additional year I live, I get way yonder, further and further away from 30. Okay? So we're not sustainable, are we? So there's no such thing as sustainable and no such thing as stasis in agriculture. Rather, it's this series of compounding, cascading effects. And the other thing about them is that these compounding, cascading effects are never neutral. They're either positive or negative. So the only question now then is not, do we have compounding, cascading effects? Yes, we do, and they're unavoidable. The question is, what are we doing in our management, in our practices on our farms? Are we encouraging and building positive compounding effects, or are we building negative compounding effects? And make no mistake about it, it's one or the other, okay? So, again, a rule of recognition so that we understand and think about everything that we're going to implement out there on the land and what it actually can do and cause. The rule of diversity. We want highly diverse and complex systems out there, not monocultures. What is the only creature on the face of the earth that creates a monoculture? Us. Go home, look in the mirror. We are it. Okay? So we create monocultures. So I want lots and lots of different functional groups. You know, I want grasses, legumes, forbs, woody species, all of these types of things out there. Why complexity and diversity? Because it creates very positive compounding and cascading effects. The other thing that it does is it builds into our plants and into the animals that eat those plants, and then the end products that we eat, whether it's a plant product or an animal protein product, it builds this incredible array of phytonutrient compounds. And I wish I had time this morning to share with you our phytonutrient research, because it's incredibly revealing and incredibly powerful. But we're going to have this as it is peer-reviewed, published. We're going to post this on our website, so stay tuned. It'll be available to you, okay? It also provides diversity in microbial species, diversity in macroorganisms, and provides exponential rather than linear results. And we're going to talk about this out in the field. These plants we call weeds, okay? I'm going to ask you very, very quickly to define a weed. Somebody. Plant out of place? Anybody else? Plant you don't want? Okay? All right? So I ask this question everywhere we go in the world, and we always get the exact same answers. But here's the deal. No one ever has provided an objective definition of a weed. Every single definition we've ever been provided with, even in the textbooks, is purely subjective. So in essence, there is no such thing as a weed. We made it up. Okay? A plant is a plant is a plant. And every plant is growing there intentionally, not haphazardly, not unintentionally. And we're going to talk about that out in the field. Why? Okay? So for instance, thistle. Thistle grows. How many people love thistle? Oh, wow, okay. We actually got some thistle lovers in here. Okay. All right. I thought I'd hear a lot of a crescendo of boos or, rotten tomatoes thrown at me or whatever. But thistle is outstanding at breaking heavily compacted soil. And it does it very rapidly within a single growing season. It'll attract a lot of earthworms in there. If you dig up thistle, you'll see lots and lots of earthworms around the thistle. And it's also a nitrogen scavenger. So places that you have a lot of excess nitrogen, it'll go in there and scavenge that, okay, and help clear the soil of excess nitrogen. Pigweed and ragweed are outstanding nitrogen scavengers. This is often why, where you feed a lot of hay or something like that, the next spring and summer, you'll see pigweed and ragweed growing there. They're trying to scavenge the excess nitrogen from all that hay feeding in one location in the wintertime. Dog fennel is an excellent soil builder, and it's also an herb that you can use in your dishes. Milkweed is a soil builder, a pollinator attractor. It's critical for monarch butterflies. It's a hard pan breaker, erosion control, earthworm attractor, all of those types of things. So if we see a plant that we call a weed, and again, remember, there really is no such thing, but if we see a plant that we call a weed, we've got to ask ourselves, what is nature trying to tell me? Why is that plant growing here at this particular point in time? So for us, diversity is absolutely key. I want as much diversity as I can possibly have. So we manage for diversity and we don't sweat the weeds at all. They're completely unimportant to us. Okay? Now here's what's in our farm seed bank. We've documented now more than 155 different plant species that are growing on our farm and our pastures. And we love every one of these. Now you'll see up here a lot of what people will call weeds, and they've even named them weed, behind some of these, like ragweed, pigweed, ironweed, so forth, right? So even in the names, they've named them that. But what we have also noted is that with every one of these, our livestock eat all of these. There's not a single plant on that list that they don't eat. Not one. And oh, by the way, many of these plants we call weeds are actually power-packed with nutrition, more so than our tame grass, highly researched forage species that we intentionally plant to provide nutrition. Nature's actually doing a better job of providing nutrition to livestock than we are. So look at this. Look at the protein content in a lot of pigweed, lamb's quarter, smartweed, dock. Boy, have I heard a lot about dock. Okay, in Ireland and here this year. It seems like y'all have had a dock explosion. We've got a bunch of it over in the U.S. But look at the crude protein and look at the in vitro dry matter digestibility values here. Okay, by the way, these are also loaded with phytonutrients that are medicinal in character, and also many of these anti-parasitic. So your animals, when they have the opportunity to graze from more forbs in the mix, they can deworm themselves, and we can stop using chemical dewormers because they're no longer needed. They are deworming themselves. So the third, and I'm going to finish up on this, and this is really where the rubber meets the road. If in your grazing, your adaptive grazing, you want to make ongoing, continuous progress, the rule of disruption is where you're going to do it. Now, to me, this is also where we have a ton of fun, okay? How many of you as kids were called disruptive? Okay. So the ones that raised the hand, you were being honest. The rest of you, you weren't being honest, okay? So, nah, just kidding. So, many of us were disruptive as kids, right? Well, guess what? You get to be disruptive again, and it's okay. Except your neighbors, Tom, may call you crazy, right? Okay? So, but what we've come to understand is nature has tremendous resilience and responds well to challenges. So we can introduce planned, purposeful disruptions, and I'm going to share some of those with you. We can introduce planned, purposeful disruptions that radically improve our soil and our plant species diversity and our animal performance and health. How many have been an athlete in here before? Okay, so I was a former collegiate wrestler, and what we know as an athlete, okay, now the Olympics are going on right now, right? Okay, so do you think that any of those athletes competing in the Olympics right now have done the same exercise routine at the same duration and intensity for their entire athletic career? If they had done that, would any of them be at the Olympics? No. So what does an athlete have to do to continue to build and to make progress? They have to introduce planned, purposeful disruptions to their exercise routine, right? They have to change the routine routinely. That's critical. Are we biology? Yeah. So if our biology functions that way, why do we think that the biology we deal with out here doesn't function that way also? Of course it does. So, how can we be disruptive? Well, first of all, stop doing things the same way every time. Now, that's human nature, right? We want routine. We want order. We want to know that, okay, I'm waking up at 5 or 6 or whatever, and I'm going to do this and this and this, and this is my day. And especially men, we want a darn checklist, right? And we feel proud of ourselves at the end of each day if we've gone down that checklist and checked off everything. Got it done. Yeah. This is why often, honestly, women are far more perceptive in this. Honestly. And in understanding how to apply. As men, boy, we gotta learn to use both sides of our brain. Right hemisphere and left hemisphere. We're very guilty of not doing that. We're one hemisphere individuals a lot of times. So we have to use both sides. So adaptive management is not a routine, a recipe, a formula, or a prescription, and never can be. So how can we be disruptive? So here we go. So here are some key disruptions in our grazing. Wow, that was a disruption. Okay. One is alter stock density. Now this is not stocking rate. Stock density is pounds per acre, not head per acre, pounds per acre, okay? So don't pick a stock density from anybody. You may have heard me mention a stock density before, or Greg Judy, or Gabe Brown, or any of us, but never ever pick a stock density and then just hang there. You got to intentionally pulse or alter stock density. Alter rotation patterns. How many people coming out of the winter start in the same pasture every spring and then make the same rotation around your farm every single year? Alter that rotation next spring. Alter grazing heights on and off. Management intensive or mid-grazing says, go on at this height, come off at this height. Doesn't work over time. You hit a wall. So alter grazing height on and off. This is huge if you want to build diversity. This next one. Alter rest periods. Alter rest periods. Alter species order. So we do multiple species. We've got cattle, we've got sheep, we've got different types of poultry, We've got pigs, all of those types of things. So altering species order as they're running through our fields can be important. Alter time of season or year that we graze a paddock, and even the number of times a year we're going to graze that paddock. Okay? Alter paddock configuration or shape. You do not, even under the same stock density and the same acres or hectares covered in that paddock, you don't get the same impact with a square paddock versus a long, narrow paddock, a rectangular paddock. They're two very different impacts. So even paddock shape matters in terms of the type of impact that you want to get. Alter paddock direction. If you're typically running paddocks east and west, change them up next time north and south. It does make a difference. All of this makes a huge difference. Bale grazing can be a planned purposeful disruption. Planned burns. Leader-follower, where I'm taking one class of livestock and immediately following them with another. Okay? Leader-follower. Contour grazing. I've got a lot of contour here. And we use that to radically improve and alter the landscape for the better. And with contour grazing, I'll talk about that when we get out in the field, but just very, very briefly, it is, we always start down low and build our paddocks with the contour, not up and down the contour, but with the contour, and then move them up the contour this way, okay? If you build paddocks up and down the contour, you will always, always have them over and under grazing sections of that paddock, and it's almost impossible to prevent them from doing that, okay? So graze along the contour and move from the bottom up, not the top down. And when we get out in the field, I'll explain why. There's a very important reason for that. And then we can do a combination of disruptions, okay? So for instance, in a single grazing event, I can alter stock density, I can alter paddock shape or configuration, and I can alter my rest period. So I have combined 3 different disruptions into a single grazing event. That magnifies the power of the disruptive event and creates even faster progress. So I'm going to show you a few videos to finish up here, and again, a few examples here of doing this in real life. So this is on our farm, and we're in what's called the Black Belt Prairie, and we're hot and humid, okay? Like, Chris, what are we probably today? Okay, close to 50. Doesn't that sound lovely to y'all? Okay, so nobody wants to come visit us right now? If you come visit us, by the way, you will be very welcome. But do yourself a favor. Don't come in the summer to visit, okay? Make it late fall, winter, early spring. You'll enjoy yourselves a lot more, okay? All right, so, but because of our climate, it can rapidly grow trees and brushy species. And this is a patch of ash and honey locust that we needed to control. So we're using the livestock rather than chemical and mechanical methods and all of that to control it. And so this was shot via drone, but if you looked at it from the ground level before we turned the cattle in, then you couldn't see through it. It was so thick and dense, there was no way to see through it at all, okay? So we turned in the cattle in a long, narrow paddock at 1 million pounds per acre. Okay, this is 1 million pounds per acre stock density. And they were in there less than an hour, but you see they started bending down and eating the leaves off the ash trees and the honey locusts and all of that, and then just trampling, the trample effect all through this with 1 million pounds of cattle moving through it. That's eating the thorny honey locust. And then at the end, you see that it just opened it all up, right? And you can see that now we've got this open floor space in there, and their intense hoof action and biological and manure and urine shedding created incredible grass growth up underneath. And so now we went back in there and got another graze and another graze and another graze, and then the grass outcompeted the trees that were left. Okay? So this works very well in being able to accomplish that. This is also on our farm. This is making a move of 600 head of grass fats. So we grass finish and harvest our cattle. So this is moving 600 head. Very quick to do this. You begin to see birds. First, the dark-colored birds, those are wood swallows. And then the bigger white birds, those are snowy egrets. And we have those and many other bird species that follow them all the time as they move from paddock to paddock. Now, why are they following them? Insects. Because as the cattle move, they're stirring up this incredible array of insects, and that's a feast for the birds, right? So the birds learn very quickly, follow the cattle, because, or the sheep as we make these moves, because we get a feast every time. These are the same cattle, and you can see the stock density that we maintain, and we do move our finishers multiple times a day, and out in the field I'll talk about why. There is a definitive reason we do that. This is during last year we had a D3 and then a D4 drought. This was in September when it was still a D3. By November it extended into a D4. Does it look like we're in a D3 drought to you? Now all of our neighbors were already feeding hay at this time. Yes. Okay, D4 is the most severe drought. Okay, so D3 is just a step below that, so it's still a pretty severe drought. So you start at D0 and go up to D4, okay? So it's the severity of, it's sort of like hurricane classification, right? So September, all of our neighbors were feeding hay. We were not feeding any hay at all. Their pastures looked like this, okay? And they had nothing to graze, that's why they were feeding hay. But because we had built aggregate, because we had built biology, and we had tremendous diversity, we still had a lot of this ahead of us. And so we're turning them in. There's more than 800 head in there, but you can't see them because it's taller than they are. Okay, so they just wade into it and disappear. So this is one of our clients moving cattle up in Cold Spring, Minnesota, Derek Smits. He is also one of our consultants with Understanding Ag. And so this is his dairy cows, and he's a grazing dairy. So Derek moves his cows 4 to 6 times a day every day to new paddocks under the fence, lift the fence and move under, and I much prefer that, okay, to move them under the fence rather than at one end or the other. Far, far more efficient and effective, okay? So he moves them under the fence, and one of the things that you may see here that you may be going, about is what, if you're a dairy farmer? He's got calves there. So the calves are reared on nanny cows with everything else, okay? So the calves aren't sorted out, put in pens, put in hutches, whatever. Why does he do it this way? Because it produces very powerful positive epigenetics in those replacement heifers, and they have far greater lifetime lactations with far, far fewer health issues. So this is epigenetically very powerful. So this is another one of our consultants and also a dairy farmer in Minnesota, Kent Solberg, standing there. That's the aftermath. So it was about 400,000 pounds per acre of stock density. Okay, 400,000 pounds per acre of stock density. Look at the degree of trample that Derek got there with those cows. Yet, with 400,000 pounds of cattle per acre, you see these nests over here. Those are red-winged blackbird nests built in the grass. Not a single one was disturbed by the cattle. Not a one. They recognize them and leave them alone and go around the nest. They don't destroy the nest. Okay? When you do adaptive grazing, it's incredible the intuition that's developed in the animals themselves. And they themselves become much more intuitive. He does a lot. He outwinters everything. Now, this is in Minnesota. Okay, it gets pretty dang cold there. You know, in Fahrenheit, it gets 30, 40, 50 below. Outwinters everything, okay? And here's the benefits of the outwintering. So no supplement other than salt. They're usually watering on snow, so he's not having to lug water around. They're watering on the snow. His cost per head per day to maintain and develop those cattle is just 56 cents per head per day, whereas with all the neighboring farms, it's costing them $4 plus per head per day. Incredible cost savings. He doesn't have to do any pen cleaning, no feeding, no TMR, ration mixing, no manure management. None of that. The animals are far healthier, and he's developing very positive epigenetics. This is at the Birdwell and Clark Ranch out in Henrietta, Texas. This is West Texas. So they're running on 12,000 acres, and they are running anywhere from 5,000 to 6,000 head of yearling cattle every year. along with 5,000 head of sheep, okay, on 12,000 acres. And when they first started, they had 40% bare ground because of past overgrazing. And when we started working with them, they have 40% bare ground. Now they have under 3% bare ground. This is making a move. This is 5,000 yearlings moving from one paddock to another. Now, this is what the massive herds of bison had to have looked like. You know, none of us have ever been able to see this in real life today, but this is what it had to look like. And we just lift the fence again. In this case, use the buggy to lift the fence. And again, they just peel right under. So they come in like this and disperse back out like that in the new paddock. Okay? So very easy to move 5,000 plus head, one person, that's all. You know, nothing to it. And then this is moving the sheep. So again, 5,000 head. These are all hair sheep. In our country, we have hair sheep because of our heat and humidity and our extreme level of parasites and all that. So moving the 5,000 head of sheep, and again, lifting the fence. And there's 20-something guardian dogs in there with them. So 20-something guardian dogs. And you can see here, you know, lifting the fence and everybody going under. For the cattle, this is the water. This is the water. Okay? There is no other water. That's it for 5,000 plus head of cattle. It's high flow. You only want a few head to drink at a time and for them to take turns. And this works incredibly well. These cattle have to perform. They can't get sick. They have to stay well. They have to gain for them to make money. They're performance cattle. This is doing it with bison. So this is a Standing Butte Ranch in South Dakota. This is 3,000 head of bison under a single strand of polywire and being moved daily. We can also do high stock density with chickens. So this is on our farm, and this is, you know, several thousand chickens. If you want to trample every blade of grass, chickens. Now, down in Mississippi, we have every biting critter known to man, okay? And that includes things like ticks and chiggers. Anybody heard of chiggers? You have? You don't want chiggers. They're nasty little red bugs that burrow up underneath your skin and make you itch and itch and itch, okay? So we have ticks, we have chiggers, we have fire ants. You know, familiar with fire ants at all? You don't want fire ants. They're called fire ants for a reason, okay? So we have all of that. We have every poisonous snake in North America. You know, basically in Mississippi, we have everything that wants to bite and eat you, okay? If you don't eat it first. That's the only caveat. So, you know, if we eat it first, then that's okay, but they're always trying to eat us as well. But the safest place to be is with the chickens because they eradicate the chiggers and the ticks and the fire ants. They eat them all. And if a snake tries to crawl through, a rattlesnake or a copperhead or a water moccasin, you know what that snake is called? Lunch. Okay, the chickens will swarm and kill and eat that snake in a hurry. So the chickens are the safest place. So if you come to visit us, you know, ask to go to the chickens. You won't get bit by anything. You know, it's amazing. We're going to walk in pastures this afternoon, but you may notice me looking around a lot and stepping in maybe a different way. That's because I'm used to doing that back home, and I'm trying to avoid the chiggers and the snakes, okay? But here I have it's hard to break that habit, and here I keep looking. So, all right. And then we're going to talk about this afternoon, what we call the biological ripple effect. This is very important, and we're going to talk about how to do this. So what we do is we identify biological hotspots on our farms, and then we take and we grow that biology out using our animals, using our livestock. So we use them as a transport mechanism to move biology and diversity out to a broader area. So this is in the desert, okay? in the southwest of the U.S. in the desert. So we identified a biological hot spot here where we had something growing, and you notice out beyond that, it's all bare, right? Bare soil, except with the exception of the mesquite, okay? Bare soil. So we concentrate our livestock here in the biological hot spot and then move them out strategically to transfer that biology and that diversity. And then this is what it looks like after we do that. There's no longer any bare ground. There's grass and all of that growing everywhere. So again, that's the power of the biological ripple effect. And yes, you can do the exact same thing here, even though you don't have near the bare ground that we do in the desert. Okay? But you can still transfer diversity in biology by using your livestock to achieve that. And then the last thing is, we're going to demonstrate this out there today, soil temperature. Okay, soil temperature. So this is temperature on bare ground or exposed soil. Okay. And by the way, the ambient temperature in Fahrenheit was 98 degrees, but you can see that it was 154 degrees on the soil. Okay. But where we had a lot of cover, you know, in that same area, it was only 141 or 75 degrees, 24 Celsius, just 75 degrees. Radical difference, radical difference. And then this is a cornfield in Illinois. And this one on the left is the temperature taken in the cornfield in August. And that temperature was 60 degrees Celsius. The pavement on the county road right beside the cornfield was 52. So the soil in the field was hotter than the road. And then this is why that is important. Last slide. If our soil temperature is 70 degrees Fahrenheit or 21 degrees or so or less, everything is functioning. We're maintaining our water. Our microbes are fully functioning. They're cycling nutrients, cycling water, doing what they're supposed to do. However, once we reach 100 degrees Fahrenheit or basically 38, then we lose 85% of our soil moisture in the top 3 inches of soil. Okay? And our microbes begin to sort of shut down on their function. At 115 degrees or 46, then our microbes begin to break down. At 140 or 60, then our microbes die. The highest I've measured soil is 182 Fahrenheit or 83 Celsius. And I measured that just 3 weeks ago in the U.S. So folks, it can heat up a lot quicker, a lot faster than we think. Okay? And if we've got some sunshine out there today, we'll see that. We'll see that. All right. That's it. Questions?
Brilliant. So we've just got time for a few questions before lunch. We'll ask if people please wait for the mic, keep your questions short, and make sure that it's a question, not a statement, please. Thank you. First one at the front here for Vic.
Thank you. That was brilliant. Sorry, that slide's just disappeared. But I don't think our soil temperature ever gets above 21 degrees where we are. So what are the challenges? You know, at what point is it too low?
Well, in Ireland this week, we measured 41.
Yeah, we had a temperature probe on the farm. So.
Yep. But we're talking surface temp. Okay, surface temp. But I guarantee you, if the sun is out today, I guarantee you we're going to measure over 2021. Yeah, yeah. In terms of being too low, I mean... Too low? Okay, so... Okay, in terms of low temperature. All right, very good question. So basically that depends, okay? So how does insulation work? Does the same insulation work in the summer and the winter? Do you put in a summer insulation in your homes and then a winter insulation? No, it's the same insulation, right? So insulation works in the summer and the winter both, right? So if you keep the soil insulated, And if we're keeping good cover on the soil through the winter, that actually keeps the soil insulated. And as the temperature drops, then you'll still have high activity. So to give you an example, when we're doing work like up in Minnesota, Michigan, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, North Dakota, places that get very much colder than here, right? We have seen lots of activity. We've seen green plants growing, okay, in the dead of winter at like 20 below and 30 below. And soil, earthworm, and microbial activity still occurring because we've kept plenty of residue on the soil for the winter. So the amount of insulation you leave for the winter absolutely matters. If you graze it down real tight, or if you've got crop fields and the crops are gone and there's no good cover crop growing there, then you're going to shut it down. The low temps are going to shut the microbes down. So insulation is critical.
Brilliant. There's a question in the middle there.
Yeah. That was great. So you're talking a lot about grazing systems in this, and I like your rule of planned, purposeful disruption. I'm thinking about in cropping systems, would you consider occasionally plowing as a planned, purposeful disruption in a sort of a crop rotation? Is that something any of your farmers are doing?
Okay, very good question. And so the beautiful thing about regenerative is that every tool is still in your toolbox. No tool has been removed, okay? So, but it's considering if I'm going to use a tool like tillage or a herbicide or whatever, then what is the harm I'm potentially doing with that? And then if I decide that I need to do that at that point in time, then what becomes critically important are what are the practices I'm going to follow that event up with. So if I am going to till, I am going to do damage, okay? I'm completely disrupting my mycorrhizal fungi. I'm losing some organic matter and carbon. I'm losing aggregation. So what am I going to do to follow that up to most rapidly build all that back and then continue from there? So the point is, are there times where maybe tillage is an appropriate tool? Yes, yes. But with any tool that has the potential to be destructive, it's the repeated, ongoing use of that tool that becomes the problem, okay? So absolutely, I can use it as a tool, but make darn sure I understand and then follow it up as quick as possible with other practices that are going to repair that damage and then continue. So in the future, I use that tool less and less and less.
Question for the lady in the white cap. And we'll take another question over here. Yeah, Emily. We'll get a mic to Emily as well, please.
Hello, thanks, Alan. That was fantastic. Earlier on, you had one of your slides, and it was talking about, it showed all this data of I can't remember all the things, how much biomass you had, how much everything. And in this country, how can you get such data? And do you need a flux tower?
That can be done, by the way. And by the way, that's certainly something we can talk about because we are working with a company that is doing this, and the cost of this technology has come way, way, way down. And there is a way to be able to get these out now. Oh, thank you. I was trying to look at you and the lights were so, but yes, that is one way. But do you need a flux tower to, no, in the afternoon session, I'm going to show you some very simple things that all of you can do to be able to quickly and easily assess first where you're at right now, okay? And then secondly, to be able to monitor ongoing progress. So the very simple tools I'm going to demonstrate this afternoon will actually help you do that. Now, if you want the bigger, broader data, like we're also gathering, then yes, flux towers and some other things can be useful, yeah.
Brilliant. Emily, and then a question at the back.
Hi, Alan. Thank you for your presentation. You talk a lot about livestock units or your stocking densities, and I just did some quick maths, and I think my calculation was around 500 head of cattle as an equivalent over here with one of your farm examples. So I worked that out to be one livestock unit per acre. Now, I'm conscious over here, one of the big challenges we have is the reduction in subsidies. And I wonder whether you've not touched much on finances. And so I guess the question would be, how do we need to look at stocking densities first? Because I'm not quite sure how viable a lot of businesses over here would be if we were to reduce our stocking densities so low with the amount of mouths we expect a farm to feed.
Reducing stock density?
Well,
are you talking stocking rate?
Yeah, stocking rates, yeah.
Okay. So why would I necessarily have to reduce stocking rate to increase stock density?
So I think my calculation was that you had 1 livestock unit per acre. We're a lot more heavily stocked over here, and to have, I guess, the same positive effects that you've seen, we would need to heavily reduce that to have the same effect?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Now, what I will say, though, are that in you know, at some point in the future, we would love to have a session and run through the numbers, because Matt and I did that at breakfast. But if the vast majority of livestock producers here, right here, okay, in the UK, in Scotland, England, Wales, Ireland as well is included in this, are overstocked for their present conditions. They're overstocked. Guess what? So are they in the US. The vast majority are overstocked. You never, ever can feed a profit into an animal and into your farm. If you're overstocked, that you're having to do a lot of feeding through the winter and that kind of thing, you're not making a good net profit. It's incredibly difficult to do that. So when you're overstocked, almost every single time that we have gone to a farm and reduced their stocking rate because they were initially overstocked so they can make progress, then immediately in year one, they realize more net profit, okay? Immediately. So, and we can show you exactly why, okay? We can run the numbers. It's real clear, real quick. But that being said, you know, you're not doing, remember I said pulse stock densities. I didn't say go ultra high every day, every time, every move, right? No, not at all, not at all. So you're pulsing stock densities. It's adaptive grazing, not prescriptive high stock density grazing. So in the field, we're going to show you a strategy that you can use. It's called high density, low density. We did this at the Academy in Ireland, and it works very well. You can do one very high density graze a day, very short duration, 30 minutes or less, and then let them out into a bigger paddock for the rest of the day, okay, to meet their nutritional needs, all of that. Here's the deal, guys. If you trample more grass, you get more fertility, more biological shedding, and you leave more grass behind, you grow more grass. You don't grow more grass by eating more grass. And you don't grow more grass by haying fields. It doesn't grow more. You're dependent on, every time you hay and you hay and you hay, you're dependent on more and more inputs to try to even maintain yields, much less grow yields. You grow yields through real fertility and biology and the impact of the animals. So what we've done, and we've done this over and over, by initially destocking, then within a 3 to 5 year period, we actually can then carry more stock than we were originally carrying. And what we have found in North America, on our data in North America, is that the regenerative farms are feeding, they're producing 4 to 11 times more food per acre than any of the conventional farms. 4 to 11 times more food per acre. So the argument that we hear over and over, well, you can't feed the world by farming regeneratively, is patently false. As a matter of fact, we can feed the world far, far better. And if we continue with conventional agriculture, we will not be able to feed the world going forward. We will experience famine and drought like we've never seen before.
question at the back and then one more before we stop for lunch.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. That was great. I've got what might be a silly question, I'm not sure. But with your contour grazing, does that reduce erosion? And to what steepness of slope is that effective to?
Yeah, actually, we've done it at pretty steep slope. Like out in Montana and Wyoming and Idaho and places like that, and the Sand Hills of Nebraska and other pretty rugged places. But so it does reduce erosion, absolutely, because instead of making paths up and down, which is going to funnel erosion straight down, right? Everything's across. And again, remember, we're not making paths at all, okay? Because we're moving. And they're moving this way along the slope rather than this way. And again, the concept is we're moving diversity and biology from down here, because you always have far more diversity and biology down than you do up because of the decades and centuries of erosion and all of that. So we're moving that. We're using our livestock as the transportation tool to move that back up slope and restore that back up slope. And the other thing that it does is it builds significant amounts of soil organic matter and new topsoil up on these critical areas upslope that have become pretty thin. And here there's a lot of those areas like that are now pretty darn thin and rocky.
One more question. We've got a burning question. Yeah, Pete. Sorry, Emily. Pete just beat you.
You might hate me for this question. Trump is a disruptor. If we're going to deal with this, how do we feed the world, and using regen agriculture, how do you get round the politics which is against you? Because this is, to me, this is the massive thing. We've worked out here. We need to go round our politicians to get good outcomes, not use them. Sorry. How do you get round, if one of your presidential candidates gets in, how do you get round that barrier?
So I guess first and foremost, I would say that if you think your politicians are worse than ours, I don't think so. Now, we may be on equal ground with that, okay, but I assure you ours are at least every bit as bad as yours are. So the key here is we've got to do this through the consumer, okay? Politicians are all about this and power, right? I mean, let's face it, that's the reality of the world. I've had friends that have gone into politics. They were going to change the world for the better, and they never did. They became just like everybody else that's in politics. It eventually gets to all of them, no matter how well-meaning they were when they went in. So what we have found is that we don't really want a ton of new policy and new regulations, because if it's developed by our governments, it's not going to make a lot of sense. And it's going to be highly, highly prescriptive, the exact opposite of what we need, right? Because that's all they know is prescriptive. They want a one-size-fits-all. Every one of you farmers in here, you just all do this. Boom, we solved the problem. How many times have you seen that, and how many times has that failed? Okay? So we've got to work. Here's the ultimate deal with politicians, and especially in countries where they're elected. Okay? Ultimately, they want to be reelected over and above the lobbying dollars that they're getting. So when the consumers start putting extreme pressure on them, and saying, we want this. And so that's one of the things we're working very hard on, is we are working to educate the consumer and to equip the consumer with knowledge and power so that they can then exert influence on the political aspect of this. And it's far better for us to make the changes we need to make rather than those being forced by government regulation. Because again, if it's forced by government regulation, none of us are going to like it in the end.
And on that note, I think it's time for lunch. Thank you very much, Alan.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Have we all had a good day? Yes. It's been awesome. Thank you so much for organising it. It's been absolutely fantastic. So I'm Sam Charlton. I am Head of Engagement for the Beef and Lamb team at HDB. And today I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk to you about routes to resilience. If you haven't seen the massive stretchy thing, where have you been all day? But there is more information at the exit. So routes to resilience is something quite different in terms of what HDB have done in the past. It isn't a technical programme, and we've heard a lot of technical and practical on-farm advice today. And Routes to Resilience isn't as much about that, and it's all about the people in agriculture. And there's a huge focus around the business side of it as well. So if you do want to find out more, please visit the website or come and speak to any member of the team. We'll be happy to talk more about it. It's based around three key principles, which is clarity, community, and ownership. Clarity is about asking the questions that you really want the answer to, and some of those questions can be a bit tricky. Community, well, there's a great example today around how powerful community can be. So it creates that space to be with like-minded folk. And then the ownership piece is about how we really hold ourselves and others to account. And that's what this next piece that we're going to do now is all about. How do we take all those ideas that are now bouncing around in your head and make them into real clear actions that you can take home and into the business? So Amy Hughes, who's a senior manager in our team, and she can't be here today. She's absolutely gutted about that, but she's moving back to the motherland, so she's very, very busy. Has got a little video to talk us through an exercise, which we're going to have a go at in a minute. But just before we hand over to Amy, I just wanted to talk about a couple of events that are coming up for Routes to Resilience. So I'd like everybody to stand up, please. Oh, the dog didn't like that. So if what I'm about to describe describes you, then you're welcome to sit down. You've never had a fight at home or in the business. You've never disagreed with a partner in the business. You've never struggled to say what's really on your mind. Oh, we're doing well so far. Oh, no, there's a few people sat down. And generally, you find it quite tricky to talk about things like succession in the farm business. Did I do that the wrong way around? You don't find it hard to talk about succession. Okay, you can all sit down now. So the next event that we've got coming up is by a lady called Elaine Fraze, and she's going to talk us through how important it is to focus on communication in family farming businesses and talk about succession. So if that's something that you all struggle with, and I think we could probably say that we do, please pick up the leaflet. It's in your bag. And come along to one of the events that's been held in October this year. It'd be great to see you there. We've also got Dallas Mount coming back this year to run our version of the Ranching for Profit series, which will be held in November, which is all about the business and all about the people. So if you want to join that, please do come along. It's in November. Sign up via the website to get notification when those tickets go live. So that's it in terms of Routes to Resilience. So if we can just find the legend that is Amy Hughes, she can talk us through what we're going to do.
You have had a lovely time at Carmen Hall in 2024. Good if I couldn't be there, but I'm sure you all had a lovely time and learned an awful lot. So you should have access to some paper worksheets, or there'll be a QR code for you to download them and have a go at home when it's a bit quieter and when you've got a bit more headspace. But I just want to talk you through those and try and explain as best I can as to what the heck we're going on about with this behaviour change stuff and why we need to just dig a little bit deeper in order to make change actually happen. Because there's nothing worse than going home with an action and failing at it or not making it happen and not really understanding why, and then you just feel rubbish about yourself, don't you? So let me just share my screen with you now. We'll have a look at this behaviour change worksheet. Right, so I have put an example here. mob grazing. I have a feeling that might have come up a few times over the last couple of days. So, to make an idea come to life, we need to identify what specific behaviours we need to change, stop, or start to make that action happen. Okay, so the easiest way to do this without going really, really deep is to put your idea down on paper. What is it that you want to do when you go home as a result of being here for the last couple of days? And the quickest way to do this is to ask yourself, why aren't you doing it already? What is stopping you and why are you not doing this already? If it's such a brilliant idea, why aren't you already doing it? Now, if the answer to this is, it's the first time I thought about it, I didn't know about it till today, that's grand. That's a fairly easy answer. But a lot of the time, that's not the case. So what we can do then is, if we have a look at what grazing, what told me about, I'm on a second here now. So my answer to this would be, I don't know how to work out fee requirements, I don't have the right infrastructure, I might not know how to set up the infrastructure, and or my dog thinks it's bollocks. He's a big fan of set stocking, and why would we do this? So those are the simple answers to the question, why aren't you already doing it? The bit that helps with motivation when you're thinking about moving forward with these ideas is to score your idea, your action on its impact and its likelihood. So the impact is, if I was to go home and start doing this tomorrow, what impact would it have on my business, on my life, on my family, you choose what the impact is on, but you need to score that. So 5 is, it would change everything. Oh my God, this is amazing. 1 is, meh, it's nice to do, but it won't really have a lot of impact. And the likelihood is, how likely am I actually going to do this? How likely is it that I'm going to bother with it? And you've got to be really honest with yourself there. So if you know that, yeah, you're probably not going to be bothered doing this, then your score's a 1. If you're dead keen, yeah, I'm going to do it, your score's a 5. Now, we can't go over too much to do, because if you do, you won't do any of it. So if you've got multiple ideas from these sessions over the last couple of days, write them all down and score them all on impact and likelihood, and you want to be choosing the one with the highest scores. If you've got some that are the same score for impact, choose the ones that are the highest score for likelihood, because we are all human, and if we know we're not really going to be bothered to do something, then you're not going to do it, are you? Right, so that is it at its basic level. If you want to go even further and dig even deeper into how you need to look at things and what you actually need to physically do, then you can move on to the second part of the sheet. Now, this is all to do with what influences behaviour. Okay, so there are 3 main areas that influence behaviour, and that is a person's capability, psychological and physical capability. It is the opportunity for them to actually do it, and that is driven by social factors and physical opportunity factors. And the third one is motivation. So automatic motivation, how giddy you get instantly about something, reflective motivation. I'm not that giddy, but I can very much see the benefits of doing this one thing. So let's go through the same example here. So you can see it. Here we are, right. Psychological capability of starting mob grazing. Do you have the knowledge to take this action? No. I don't know the technicalities of working out feed requirements, setting up pilots, etc., etc. So there's an action for you straight away. Go and find out. Go and visit some people that are doing it, whatever. But there is the actual action. It's not just as simple as starting a mob grazing system. The action that you need to take is to find out how to do it. Okay, the second part of psychological capability is, are you mentally well enough to do so? So be honest with yourself there. Do you have the headspace to step through and do these things? Right, let's have a look at physical capability. So, in the example of mob grazing, are you fit enough to move fences every day? Have you got a physical impairment that will stop you from doing that? And if you're off, is there somebody else that's physically capable of doing it? And I know that sounds like a really easy question, but the system's going to fall down if you haven't got people that can physically walk and move fences and do the things that you need to do. Okay, so that's a fairly easy one. If we move on to opportunity, then this is a huge one for farming, especially the social side of things. Do you have the support from the people around you to take this action? If you start spending a couple of hours a day moving fences, setting up fences, are you going to get it in the neck from anybody? So, do you have the support? No. Dad thinks it's bollocks, which is a big issue in a lot of families, isn't it? And it might not be Dad, but my dad's difficult, so I'm going to stick with that one for this example. No one else in the area is doing it, and I'm worried about what they might say. So in this instance, the action that you need to take is to spend some time getting through to your dad as to why this is a good idea. And that might be taking to see it. It might be explaining yourself better. It might be providing you with the financial benefits of it. You will know the answer to that, but that is the action you need to take. You don't need to start modelling. You need to persuade your dad that it's a good thing to make your life easier, so that every time you go out and do it, you don't get somebody shouting at you. In terms of the social opportunity in communities, we see this a lot with farmers, and I'm sure you guys have it as well. That, unfortunately, is just something that you've got to get right in your head, but that is not to say that it is a big barrier in creating changes. If the rest of your community and all your neighbours are shouting at you for doing something different, you either have to let that go over your head, or it will stop you from making changes. So maybe that's a case of going to see somebody that's done it and that's had some similar problems with the neighbours, and how did they overcome it? Maybe it's just chatting it through with them and trying to explain to them why you're doing it, if you feel that way inclined. Physical opportunity, then, we're talking here about things like money. Do you have the money for the infrastructure? Are there any environmental regulations, or any regulations actually, that might stop you from doing this? So that's the physical opportunity that you've got. I'll just shove myself over here. Then the motivation bit. Now this is the funny bit, because you go in with an action plan and you sort of automatically think, well, I've written it down as an action, so I must be motivated. But be really honest about yourself. Are you really excited about doing this? So having automatic motivation means, oh, I'm giddy, I'm so giddy. Like, I spend my whole life in this area, which is also a bit of a downfall. Or is it the fact that Alan Williams has told you today that it's a good idea to do mob grazing, but I really can't be asked. You have to figure out where you start on that scale. And then if you fall into that bottom bracket where you've heard Alan speak today and he says it's a great idea, but you're not really sold on it, can you see the benefits of doing it? Do you truly believe that it will be a benefit for whatever reason, economic, soil health, grass growth, whatever it might be? Can you actually see those benefits? And if the answer to this is no, but you're still after doing it, then you need to go away and figure out how you're going to persuade yourself. Do you need to go see some more people that are doing it? Do you need to look at the figures? Do you need to do a business plan? Blah, 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 blah. You need to figure out how you are going to motivate yourself. Motivation is the biggest one of these three pillars to behaviour change, because we are all people, and if we're not motivated, then we're very unlikely to do something. Capability and opportunity feed into motivation, and in my personal opinion, social opportunity is probably the biggest thing in farming. But you've all been with each other today. You've now built your group of people that you can ring up and ask things and get advice from. So yeah, don't do it on your own. So Marco, Sam, Liz and Nick are going to help you through this over the next few minutes. And as I say, if you don't feel in the headspace to do this now, make sure you scan the QR code or take some forms home and you can have a go at home. But going home with an action is unlikely to actually create any change. You've got to dig a little bit deeper. Hope you all have a good time. See you soon.
So everybody will have a piece of paper so we can have a look. And what we're going to do now is just nip round representatives from the workshop, sort of working through that. So what's the one thing that they might take from today? Okay, so I was going to call people up here, but I might do it as a roving thing, just because there's quite a few people. Do you want to? So first up, we're going to go to Marion.
So I did the river flies. And there weren't very many of us, but it was all the better for that because we had fantastic attention. My takeaway is that I will never be able to unsee now what is in a river or what could be in a river, and that is just fantastic. And if I were able to show that to all the people that are worried or not worried about rivers, then it would be a beautiful thing.
Thank you. So, from the Daniel Woodland Grow one, we have Erasmus.
Yeah, so it was a composting presentation. Last year I did the composting with the teas and all that. And I went away, I've made some beautiful compost, but I don't actually know what's in it. and it's quite difficult to get that into the ground. And so Daniel's talk was really interesting because it seems to give me a solution for getting the fungus into the ground according to his claims, within a year, as opposed to what would take normally 5 years, 7 years. So yeah, I found very interesting.
Thank you. We are handing over to Niels to talk through what he and Chris spoke about at his conference. I've lost him.
I've suddenly realised it probably should be somebody that attended the session rather than delivered it.
Well, what were you aiming for someone to pick up from your conference? Then we can ask them whether they did that. No.
Would you be up for doing a little feedback? Yeah? Great.
This is interactive.
Oh, hi there. We looked at the compaction rates between the middle of the field and the hedgerow, and it was significantly different in the middle of the field. The compaction level was, I don't know, there's 15 centimetres. At the hedgerow edge, it was negligible. And most interestingly, the most interesting thing was that after an hour, the water still hadn't infiltrated through the soil in the middle of the field, whereas in the hedgerow, it was seconds, between seconds and a few minutes. So I learned a lot. Thank you.
And what are you going to plan to do, or with your farmers or at home?
I'll just take it back to Cumbria Connect. So I work for Cumbria Connect and do education and awareness work. So I'll think about doing some workshops and things like that on soils. So brilliant
Perfect.
stuff. Thank you.
We're heading to Mega next, who was at the agroforestry and livestock section.
Well, we had pretty much the whole talk, and I'm pretty sure we didn't get through the list of all the ways that trees in the landscape benefit livestock in terms of creating a climate and welfare resilient livestock farming. And also, if I'm allowed a second one, that these habitats can grow really quickly, so just get on and get them in.
I'm sorry, also Tom was prepped for that as well. Tom, different Tom. Which Tom? Are you sure? Okay. And then, feel me now, go to Tom.
This better be good, Tom.
No pressure. I thought that was absolutely perfectly done. There were one or two challenges that people noted with respect to compliance and consistency between schemes and things like that. And there was I think we spoke about the tax, but the key and the implications of putting trees in the wrong place. But I think, as we all discussed, the government might change anyway, so who knows what's going to happen.
And is it change what you might be doing at home?
No, I'm still doing. It's confirming it. So for me personally, it was brilliant.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom.
I think just to look at the whole system holistically, as opposed to just looking at it in certain areas, and actually that way, then you can actually get a better understanding of what you may or might not change, if that makes sense.
And in terms of things to do?
Yes. I suppose, yeah, holistically, looking at the grass rates, the socking, the water flow, and looking at all the soil, and I suppose it's all how that all then brings together within what you're trying to change.
Okay, so observation, more
Yes.
observation, taking in wider range. Thank you.
So I thought it was a really, really good session. It followed on really nicely from Alan's stuff about the fact that it's not prescribed, there's not a formula, that there's, the context is obviously the most important thing, and it really sort of reinforced that kind of adaptive nature of kind of grazing practices on your farm. And then there was quite a lot of good technical information, just stuff about sort of fencing systems and water flow rates and stuff like that, so very good. And it won't massively change what we do, but again, it's confirmed that what we're doing is probably on the right lines.
Thank you. We now have Ed from the Tim and Pete tree session.
So yeah, it was the trees and the importance of them and the different palatability and browsability of different trees and the whole network that they create within the field. And take home is that we're going to carefully plan out what tree we're going to, we want to put some trees in. It's what kind of setting they go in, as some trees suit the woodland more and some are more infield. And it's just the importance of carefully planning out what you put in where, but getting them in.
Quick question. How many times did they mention cactus tree guards?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah.
And then we've got on this, Emily. Sorry, Alan, there's a slight shift. We're going to pick on Emily to do what did she learn from the Alan session?
I learned that basically what you've been doing, what you've been used to doing could have been right and probably was right at the time. And when you change systems, so for instance, grazing lambs on long grass, it might not work initially because we haven't changed the system enough to support it, but that doesn't mean it's not going to work in the future. And actually, it's just working through those initial, bad times to get to the good times, if that makes any sense. So, and to let plants express themselves naturally in terms of morphology, we'll actually end up having a lot more productive grasslands, but also epigenetics in livestock to breed livestock to suit your environment, not continually buy in, which sometimes we're all guilty of. So yeah.
Is there things you might, or the one thing you might take home or do this season?
Well, most of our lambs are gone, so that's good. So long grass grazing isn't a problem for us now. But yeah, I'd definitely restructure our breeding and think more about keeping more of our own replacements rather than buying in lameness from the north.
We're now in the north, so
yeah,
it's slightly awkward.
I know. No, but yeah. So think about breeding our own replacements to suit our own farm and our own things.
Perfect, thank you. So we're now handing over to Tim.
Yeah. So randomly, in this room, we're mainly farmers and land managers and people interested in grazing and soil and stuff. But there is a man in this room who's a brewer. And Tim phoned us up and wanted to come and visit us. And then we spent quite a long time in a field, it's Renault's Heaven, moving cows, but talking about beer. So Tim's just going to... So he's very kindly been a great sponsor of this year's event. Enjoy his stuff in the bar. But I'm just going to hand over to Tim now, because he's going to give you a few minutes on why he's here.
Thanks, Nick. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
The first thing I'm going to do is I'm not going to talk too much about farming, because you need me telling you how to farm like I need you telling me how to make beer.
Fighting?
Oh, no, sorry. Yeah. But yeah, so like, I suppose I'm here to sort of say a couple of things. The first thing is that, you know, I do a lot in my job now. I'm one of the founders and director at Fell. We have a small group of bars and a production brewery down in the south of the county. This is by far the most exciting thing I've done this year, and this was by far the thing that I knew that I wanted to get involved with the most, because I think what's happening in this room is so incredibly important and interesting. And I thought I wanted to just share with you a couple of ideas. The first is that we all get so siloed within our industries. We all get so bogged down in the day-to-day. And why don't we stick our heads above the parapet? Because we're all so busy. Yes, I massively get that. But wow, we really, really, really should, because there is so much value to be had by sharing ideas, by speaking to each other. Because to me, the grain I put in my beer, until so recently, is just this stuff that comes in a bag, and we throw it in the mash tun and make beer in it. We have no idea where it comes from. There is actually so little stuff that separates you from us, and that is true of so many different industries and sectors and businesses, and we really should all try to speak to each other more and get to know each other better. And secondly, I wanted to talk about another thing that I thought might be of value to you, is that, so we are quote-unquote hipster craft beer, and yeah, we cannot compete on price with Macro. We cannot compete on quality anymore. Frankly, they've gotten way better at making the beer that we do. We cannot compete on service as much as we like to think we do a good job. We cannot compete on any reasons other than the fact that we have authenticity and the fact that we care about the communities that we serve, and that we are trying our best to make the world a little bit better through the work that we do and being conscious of the environment. And so how come I can still sell my beer at this epic premium? It is because, as hard as it is to see, consumers do genuinely, ultimately, when push comes to shove, given the choice, do care about this. And I think that they're going to care about it more and more in the years to come. And so thank you ever so much for having me here today. It's been a huge privilege. I have found it utterly fascinating. And yeah, go and have a beer.